Chapter 792. Of course, Murong Yu had no intention of killing Huang Qi, although he'd sent Huang Qi flying with a powerful slap. That was all he'd done. He hadn't done any damage at all. However, Huang Qi was infuriated by Murong Yu's slap. After smashing through a small continent, Huang Ho roared, and an incomparably terrifying power exploded out, shaking the heavens and splitting the earth, destroying the heaven and earth. Whoosh! Huang Qi transformed into a streak of yellow light and charged at Murong Yu. Haha! Gee! Lu Ran, I'll leave Huang Qi to you. He's the third quasi-divine realm sea creature we've killed. If we kill him, we'll no longer be a threat when we unify the world of immortals. Murong Yu laughed heartily. At the same time, his figure flashed and flew to the other side. Roar! Huang Qi was enraged by Murong Yu's words. At this moment, Ji also flew past him. As a result, Huang Ho immediately gave up on pursuing Murong Yu and swatted his claw at Ji. Piss off! Ji snorted and responded with a palm strike of his own. Suddenly, a violent power covered the sky as it blasted towards Huang Ho. After an earth-shattering boom, Huang Su was once again dismayed to find that he had been sent flying by a palm strike. Moreover, the attack this time was even more lethal. His blood and qi roiled from the impact. However, Huang Qi's body was incredibly strong. In fact, every sea creature in the East Sea was incredibly strong. Hadn't A.O. Feng only been severely injured when he'd taken a joint attack from Ji and the monarch of the Immortal Palace? Huang Qi roared and flashed with yellow light. His body swayed and grew from half a man's height to the size of a small mountain. He stomped out and shattered large swaths of space. With a swipe of his claw, the firmament was destroyed, the seas dried up, and the rocks crumbled. His claw shattered the firmament and headed straight for Ji. An incomparably powerful shock wave rippled out, and even Ji's expression changed. You court death. Ji Hao was infuriated. Originally, when he was blocked by Huang Qi, Murong Yu had already overtaken him by quite a distance. Now that Huang Ho had recklessly charged forward, Ji Mo's killing intent was stirred. With a furious roar, he punched out with one of his fists towards the sky and the other towards the earth. Heaven-splitting divine fist kill. Bang! After transforming, Desolate strength increased by hundreds of thousands of dragon power. However, Ji's power was close to 7 million. More than 1 million Earth Dragon power was enough to crush Desolate Qi's power. As a result, Huang Qi's power couldn't even withstand a single blow. He was directly blasted into pieces by Ji Hao's heaven-blasting divine fist. Puff! Huang Qi's power was shattered, and a terrifying power rushed over. Even though Huang Qi's body was incomparably strong, he was still able to withstand it. However, he was still sent flying while spurting out blood. Die! Ji Hao roared, his killing intent surging. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Huang Qi, unleashing an invincible godly fist. Bang! Before Huang Su could even react, Ji's fist had already landed on his body. Boom! An incomparably violent power erupted, instantly shattering Huang Su's mountainous body. Huang Su roared in pain. With a shake of his body, he returned to his original height of half a man. Even so, he was still blasted hundreds of millions of miles away by the powerful force. He crashed through countless voids and spat out a copious amount of blood. He was severely injured. What a terrifying person. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Huang Su looked at Ji Hao, who was striding toward him. His eyes were filled with terror. Then, with a flicker of his body, he tore his way into the distance. Ji Hao was too powerful. He was no match for him. If the fight continued, he would die without a doubt. At this moment, Ji Hao, who was chasing Huang Su, suddenly heard Murong Yu's hearty laughter. Ha ha! I won't play with you anymore. Ji Hao's heart sank. He turned around and saw Murong Yu's figure vanish into the void. Die! Ji Hao roared. His fist shattered billions of miles of space-time. Separated by hundreds of millions of miles, he directly bombarded the void where Murong Yu was his. Under Ji Hao's furious attack, the void within a radius of 10 billion miles shattered like glass. Even the spatial crystals were blasted out and fell down piece by piece. However, Moronyu had already disappeared from where he stood. Ji hadn't blasted him out of the void. In fact, Moronyu didn't escape by tearing through the void. Instead, he entered the Hichu Luoshu world and was transported to an unknown location. 2 pieces of trash chasing after a single person, and he actually managed to escape? Ji looked furious and walked forward with a murderous look. He looked at Lu Ran, Palace Master of the Immortal Palace, and Tu Wanshua, Sect Master of the Devil's Doctrine, with disdain. Lu Ran and Tu Wanshua's expressions were also somewhat ugly. Morongyu's speed was simply too fast. After Ji Hao was blocked by Huang Ho for a moment, the distance between them and Moronyu quickly lengthened. In the end, Moronyu seized an opportunity to enter the Hichu Luoshu world. 2 super experts couldn't stop Moronyu and let him escape. This made Lu Ran and Tu Wanshua feel a little embarrassed. Therefore, when Ji Hao looked at them with disdain, they fell silent. That kid must have entered the Hichu Luoshu world. He can't escape far. He should be in this void. Just blast him out of the void. Tu Wanshua's eyes flashed with a murderous aura. That's the only way. I hope he can't move. Otherwise, Lu Ran's face was a little gloomy. As he spoke, his large hand had already reached out and grabbed a large part of the void in front of him. His large hand expanded with the wind, instantly growing to a size of billions of miles. Then, he suddenly grabbed a large part of the void. Lu Ran snorted coldly. His large hand exerted force, and the void in his hand was instantly crushed and shattered. At the same time, Tu Wanshua and Ji Hao attacked as well. Violent power constantly erupted. The void within 100 billion miles, or even 1 trillion miles, and even the EC was shattered. However, they still couldn't find any trace of Moronyu. Did he escape? Ji Hao and the other 2 had a bad feeling. With their strength, they could shatter the entire void. Even a speck of dust in the void couldn't escape their senses. Not to mention Hichu Luoshu. However, they couldn't find Hichu Luoshu at all. Let's do it again. I don't believe he can escape our attack. Tu Wanshua roared. Violent power erupted again, shattering the sky. Just as Ji Hao and the others were about to shatter the void and force Moronyu out of it, in Dajo, the Immortal World Alliance, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the sky above the Dajo city, and a black-clothed young man strode out of it. After the black-clothed young man appeared, the void crack behind him disappeared. However, he didn't leave the sky above Dajo city. At the same time, everyone in Dajo city felt an extremely powerful and irresistible spirit descend from the sky. It enveloped the entire city and swept past everyone's bodies, causing their hearts and souls to tremble. The black-robed youth was Moronyu, who'd shaken off Ji Hao and the others. Then, he'd used Hichu Luoshu's teleportation to return to Dajo city. Back on the Pill King continent, Moronyu had received a spiritual transmission from an early-stage immortal sovereign he controlled. He'd said that an enforcer had appeared in Dajo city. That was why Moronyu had hurried back to Dajo city as quickly as possible. He didn't want to miss out on this enforcer. However, when his spirit consciousness spread out, he frowned slightly. He discovered a super powerhouse in Dajo city, a quasi-god powerhouse. However, Moronyu quickly relaxed. If there hadn't been a quasi-god overseeing Dajo city, the Divine Union would have attacked long ago. The Palace Master of the Immortal Palace and the others wouldn't have left the Immortal World continent and entered the Pill King continent. Plus, Moronyu believed that there had to be a quasi-god overseeing the Immortal World Alliance's headquarters in Dajo city. There might even be more than one quasi-god overseeing the city. Found it. Moronyu's spirit consciousness had also sensed the aura of origin source when he'd discovered the quasi-god. Furthermore, Moronyu was pleasantly surprised to discover that there was more than one enforcer in Dajo city. There were 3 enforcers. 3 enforcers. If I can take control of their cultivation realms, my strength will probably break through the 6 million mark. Then, besides G, no one else will be a match for me. As long as I reach 6 million earthly dragon powers, Shenzhen will be able to officially rise. Murong Yu was delighted. Ji was very powerful. After raising his power to the limit, he had already neared 7 million earthly dragon powers. The Devil Sect's sect master, Tu Wanshue, and the others weren't bad either. However, they only had 6 million earthly dragon powers. Murong Yu believed that as long as his power reached 6 million earthly dragon powers, he would be able to sweep away the palace master of the Immortal Palace and the others. There was no time to lose. Murong Yu immediately wanted to make a move and capture the 3 enforcers. However, just as he was about to make a move, a furious shout was heard. "Do you have a death wish, kid? How dare a mere immortal emperor sweep his spirit consciousness across Dazhou City without any restraint?" Before the voice had even finished speaking, a towering hand rose up from Dazhou City and grabbed at Murong Yu, who was in the void. It wanted to crush Murong Yu. "You're just a mere immortal venerate," Murong Yu sneered. He didn't make a move. He just shouted, "Explode!" Bang! Before Murong Yu's voice had even finished speaking, the huge hand exploded violently. In Dazhou City, a mid-stage immortal venerate's face turned pale as he spat out blood. What a powerful force! The mid-stage immortal venerate looked at Murong Yu in the void in horror. After exploding the mid-stage immortal venerate's attack, Murong Yu also made a move. The large hand stretched out and split into 3 along the way. They became 3 large hands that grabbed at the 3 enforcers in different locations in Dazhou City. "I'm only here because of 3 people." As he spoke, Murong Yu's big hand had already grabbed the 3 enforcers. There were 2 men and 1 woman. The strongest among them was an early-stage immortal venerate, while the weakest was only an immortal lord. They are all from the Immortal Realm Alliance. "Murong Yu, you are too presumptuous." Li Zhang's face was gloomy and he was furious. Endless murderous aura shot out from his body. Murong Yu had captured 3 people from the Immortal Realm Alliance right under his nose. This was like giving him 3 hard slaps in the face. However, what could he do? He didn't dare to fight here. Once they fought here, the power of the quasi-god realm would destroy the entire Dazhou. Once the Divine Union found out, they might attack. At that time, the Immortal Realm Alliance might collapse because of this. However, if he allowed Murong Yu to capture people like this, the anger in Li Zhang's heart would only grow stronger. Get lost. In the end, after weighing the situation, Li Zhang didn't make a move on Murong Yu, even though he was furious. He knew that even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do anything to Murong Yu. "Ha! Let Lu Ran and the others know that I, Murong Yu, will be back very soon. When the time comes, the Immortal Realm Alliance and the Divine Union will be destroyed, and I, Murong Yu, will become the overlord of the Immortal Realm." Ha! Murong Yu laughed heartily as his arms shook, shattering the void. Then, he stepped into the void and disappeared. However, his voice lingered in the air above Dazhou City for a long time. It lingered for 3 days. Meanwhile, Lu Ran and the others were still in the East Sea, constantly shattering the void. They didn't know that Murong Yu had already captured 3 enforcers in Dazhou. "Sir, are we going to let him leave just like that?" After Murong Yu disappeared, a late-stage immortal venerate from the Immortal Realm Alliance flew over to Li Zhang's side and asked, "Think of a way to inform the Alliance Master and the others." "Murong Yu is too strong. I'm no match for him." Li Zhang's expression darkened. After he said this, his body flashed, and he disappeared from his original spot. 3 enforcers. If I can control all their powers, my strength can definitely rise to 6 million Earth Dragon powers. Ha! After Murong Yu entered Hichu Luoshu, he immediately left the sky above Dazhou City and returned to the South Mountain Shenzhen. However, he didn't leave Hichu Luoshu. The 3 enforcers weren't Deng Tian and Ming Yan from the Shenluo and Ming Monarch cultivation worlds, but 3 other immortal realms. If these 3 people are included, I already control 12 immortal realms. That's 1/3 of the Yin Wang, immortal realms, immortal realms. However, I'm afraid that it will get harder and harder to find more immortal realms in the future. Moronyu muttered to himself. If the enforcers hadn't taken the initiative to reveal their identities, outsiders wouldn't even know that he was an enforcer. Of course, if they were within a certain range of Moronyu would be able to sense it. As long as Moronyu was given enough time, he could search the entire immortal realm and find these enforcers one by one. However, this wasn't what Moronyu was worried about. He was worried about whether or not all of these enforcers were in the immortal realm. For example, Ao Feng had killed an enforcer and obtained the immortal realm's origin source. If Moronyu hadn't coincidentally killed a sea snake and lured Ao Feng out, he probably wouldn't have obtained the immortal realm's origin source and wouldn't have been able to control it. What if other enforcers were killed and the immortal realm's origin source was taken? Therefore, it wouldn't be easy for Moronyu to gather the immortal realm's origin source of 36 immortal realms. However, that was a matter for the future. The three of you take the immortal realm's origin source from their bodies and give it to me. Otherwise, I'll do it myself, Moronyu said coolly to the three people in front of him. Don't even think about running away. Even if you have the immortal realm's origin source, you won't be able to escape. If you don't believe me, you can try. However, you know very well what the result will be. Moronyu looked at the three enforcers and said coolly. The three of them looked at Moronyu angrily. However, they were only angry. They knew that they weren't Moronyu's match, and that they couldn't escape even if they wanted to. If they could, they would have escaped back to the immortal realm when they were in Dajo City. As long as they escaped back to the immortal realm. So what if Moronyu was a quasi-god? He wouldn't dare enter their immortal realm. I'll give you 10 breaths of time. If I don't see the immortal realm's origin source, you'll all die. Moronyu's eyes flashed coldly. His time was very precious, and he didn't have time to waste on these people. I'll give it to you. Before Moronyu's voice fell, the enforcer who was only an immortal monarch hurriedly responded. Then, he took the origin source and presented it to Moronyu. Moronyu nodded slightly. After receiving the origin source, he slapped it into his dantian. At the same time, he gave the immortal monarch a strand of life force. Boom! After the life force entered his body, the immortal monarch's body suddenly exploded with a powerful aura. He had actually broken through from the late-stage immortal monarch realm to the immortal emperor realm. Thank you for your help, Senior. The man was overjoyed and bowed to Moronyu. He knew that it was because of Moronyu's power that he had been able to break through. Otherwise, he would have been weakened after being deprived of the origin source and wouldn't have been able to break through. Moronyu's eyes revealed a look of surprise. When he looked at the man again, he discovered that this man's aptitude was also very heaven-defying. Are you willing to join my primal chaos, Shenzhen? For some reason, Moronyu suddenly asked. I'm willing. The immortal monarch's face revealed a look of excitement. After seeing Moronyu's strength, if he wasn't willing, even though he was a member of the Immortal Realm Alliance, he knew that he would never be able to make a name for himself in the Immortal Realm Alliance. However, if he joined the Shenzhen, he might be able to make a name for himself. After all, he had heard that Moronyu was very generous to his own people. What about you guys? Moronyu turned to look at the other two enforcers. The two enforcers hurriedly presented their origin source to Moronyu. Moronyu also gave each of them a strand of life force, allowing them to recover to their peak state. They wouldn't be weakened after being deprived of their life force. You guys stay here for now, Moronyu instructed. Then his figure flashed, and he left. I'm really looking forward to it. To what extent can my strength grow in 3 cultivation worlds? Refine the cultivation world's origin source for me. Not long after, Moronyu had already refined the 3 origin sources. As usual, it increased by 100,000 dragon power. The 3 origin sources gave me a total of 300,000 dragon power. Right now, my total strength has already reached 3 million, and I'm one step closer to 6 million. To the cultivation world. Moronyu stepped out of Hichu, Luoshu, and disappeared from the immortal realm. He appeared in the origin space of a cultivation world. In less than half a day, Muron-Yu had completely taken control of this cultivation world. 300,000 dragon power. My total strength has increased to 6 million. Ha! Muron-Yu laughed heartily. His figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in the second cultivation world. Chapter 794. No more, no less. Exactly 6 million Earth Dragon power. Muron-Yu left the third cultivation world with a smile on his face. The 3 cultivation worlds had increased his Earth Dragon power by 1 million. It could be said that his strength had increased explosively. If he swallowed something like the bloodthirst pill, Muron-Yu was confident that he could suppress existences like Tu Wanchue. After all, their strength was only 6 million Earth Dragon power. Only Ji, a fallen god, had strength close to 7 million Earth Dragon power. It would be difficult for Muron-Yu to suppress him. Moreover, Muron-Yu found that as his strength increased, the bloodthirst pill's effect on him decreased. Most likely, after reaching 7 million Earth Dragon power, even the bloodthirsty pill would not have any effect. However, Muron-Yu's battle formula could also increase his strength, but it only increased it by 2 times. The battle formula was very difficult to cultivate, and the speed was so slow that it made one's hair stand on end. Of the 3 9-syllables mantras that Muron-Yu obtained, only the army formula was cultivated to a higher level, and it could create illusory light wings. However, to him, the fighting character formula, the army character formula, and the Zai character formula were only at the beginning stage, because it was too difficult to improve. Muron-Yu felt that the 9-syllables mantras didn't seem to be for cultivators or immortals to cultivate. The starting point of cultivation was deity. The 9-syllables mantras were meant for deities and above to cultivate. This was Muron-Yu's feeling. The Lord God realm is divided into 3 stages: early, middle, and late. Reaching 6 million Earth Dragon power means that one has entered the middle quasi-god realm. G is close to 7 million Earth Dragon power and is close to the late quasi-god realm. Legend has it that once one breaks through to the late quasi-god realm, their strength will increase greatly, and they can instantly kill anyone below the late quasi-god realm. Muron-Yu's expression was somewhat gloomy. He had a vague feeling that Ji might break through to the late quasi-god realm. That's all for later. Now that I've broken through to the mid-quasi-god realm and obtained the God's Tribulation Pill, Shenzhen will officially rise to power and dominate the immortal world. Muron-Yu pondered in his heart. With a flash, he arrived in the Hichu Luoshu world and found Hichu. Hichu, how's the analysis of the God Tribulation Pill coming along? After Muron-Yu obtained the God Tribulation Pill, he immediately handed it over to Hichu so that he could use the Yin-Yang Cauldron to analyze the pill formula. Once it was analyzed, it could be mass-produced. Young Master, not only have we analyzed the recipe for the God Tribulation Pill, but look. As he spoke, Hichu flipped his hand, and a pill that emitted a faint halo appeared in his palm. It even contained the aura of tribulation, lightning, and gave off a rich medicinal fragrance. God's Tribulation Pill. Muron-Yu's eyes instantly emitted a resplendent divine light as he grabbed the pill. It's so rich and powerful. It's even better than the one I got in the Pill King continent. Hichu, can you mass-produce it now? Muron-Yu couldn't help but exclaim. Once he could mass-produce it, Muron-Yu wouldn't be far from dominating the immortal world. I can, but I can't mass-produce it, Hichu said bitterly. Muron-Yu's heart skipped a beat. He quickly asked what was going on. The ingredients of the God's Tribulation Pill are very complex. It requires the power of tribulation lightning. This isn't a problem. There's a large amount of tribulation lightning in the Hichu Luoshu world, although the power of tribulation lightning is much weaker. However, in addition to the power of tribulation lightning, each God's Tribulation Pill requires a terrifying amount of power. 10 ninth-grade immortal meridians can only produce 1 God's Tribulation Pill. Only 100 God's Tribulation Pills can be produced in a day, Hichu said with some displeasure. The yin-yang cauldron could produce pills, but it required a large amount of power. Immortal meridians aren't a problem. There are plenty of ninth-grade immortal meridians in the Tian Fa world. Only 100 God's Tribulation pills can be produced in a day. In other words, one quasi-God expert can be produced in a day. This speed isn't slow. Murong Yu heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Murong Yu was willing, he could produce hundreds of millions of Breaking Emperor pills in a day. However, the God's Tribulation pill was countless times more powerful than the Breaking Emperor pill and the Breaking Supreme pill. Murong Yu would be satisfied if he could produce 100 God's Tribulation pills in a day. One quasi-God in a day. If you're still not satisfied, then you're really greedy. After taking the 100 God's Tribulation pills from Hichu, Murong Yu returned to Shenzhen. Primal Chaos Shenzhen, Sacred Palace. All the upper echelons of Primal Chaos Shenzhen were present in the palace. They were all immortal emperors, and a considerable number of them were late-stage immortal emperors. They were existences who could trigger the God's Tribulation. In the world of immortals, immortal emperors and immortal sovereigns could trigger the God's Tribulation. In other words, an immortal had two chances to trigger the God's Tribulation. When a late-stage immortal sovereign triggered the God's Tribulation, their strength would be several times stronger than when an immortal emperor triggered the God's Tribulation. However, an immortal sovereign's tribulation was much more terrifying than an immortal emperor's tribulation. Very few immortal emperors were willing to trigger the God's Tribulation. It wasn't that they wanted to become immortal sovereigns in order to become stronger after the God's Tribulation. In fact, not every late-stage immortal emperor could become an immortal sovereign. They didn't have the confidence to pass the God's Tribulation. Once they failed to pass the tribulation, they would completely vanish into thin air. You all know what happened on the Pill King continent. That's right, I've obtained a God's Tribulation pill. With my great abilities, I've created over 100 God's Tribulation pills, Murong Yu said coolly after sweeping a glance over the crowd. Hearing Murong Yu's words, everyone in the hall couldn't help breathing heavily. What was a God's Tribulation pill? They all knew. As long as they had enough God's Tribulation pills, they could undergo the God's Tribulation and ascend to the God's realm at any time. In other words, as long as they survived the God's Tribulation, they'd ascend to godhood. For a moment, everyone looked at Murong Yu with fervent gazes. They all wanted Murong Yu's God's Tribulation pills. Murong Yu swept his gaze across the crowd with a smile on his face. I can understand your feelings, but today, I only need to choose one person to trigger the God's Tribulation and use the God's Tribulation pill. I won't lie to you. These God's Tribulation pills are still in the experimental stage. After all, whether or not the God's Tribulation pill can withstand a heavenly tribulation is only a legend. We can't be sure. Therefore, we need someone to be our guinea pig. If none of you are willing, you can choose from the entire Shenzhen. Are any of you willing? Sacred Lord, I'm willing. Xiahou Zhua was the first to step forward. He looked at Murong Yu with an excited expression, his eyes blazing with passion. Sacred Lord, I'm willing as well. He Hu was the second to stand up. The third to step forward was Zhang Ao, who'd been with Murong Yu since the cultivation realm. The three of them stood up at almost the same time. What made Murong Yu depressed was that other than the three of them, everyone in the sacred hall who'd reached the late stage, immortal emperor realm expressed their willingness to try. Moreover, all of them had fervent gazes. This made Murong Yu speechless. Aren't you afraid of being annihilated by the God's Tribulation? Murong Yu was speechless as he looked at those fervent gazes. He really couldn't understand. In fact, Murong Yu's talent was too heaven-defying. He didn't know the pain of those who weren't as talented as him. If they couldn't transcend the tribulation to become a god, they would either be annihilated by the heavenly tribulation or die silently at the end of their lifespan. The longer they lived, the stronger they were, and the more they didn't want to die. Many people risked their lives to trigger the God's Tribulation before the end of their lifespan. If they transcended it, they would become a god. Otherwise, they would be annihilated. However, most of them died under the God's Tribulation. These people in the sacred hall had all used various elixirs to raise their cultivation. It was undeniable that they had extremely high aptitudes. However, not many of them could transcend the god's tribulation and become a god. Now that the god's tribulation elixir was available, they immediately wanted to try. Even if they died under the god's tribulation, they were willing. Are you all willing to use the god's tribulation elixir? Morongyu laughed. Morongyu was rather confident in the power of the god's tribulation elixir. However, he couldn't be at ease without trying it. Xiahou, you're the first to come out, so you'll be the lab rat. The others don't need to be envious. You all have a chance to obtain the god's tribulation elixir. Morongyu hurriedly said when he saw the envious looks on the others' faces. Xiahou was immediately overjoyed. He took over 100 god's tribulation elixirs from Morongyu's hands, wishing he could immediately trigger the god's tribulation. Sacred Master, are there really more god's tribulation elixirs? Heihu asked with a mischievous laugh. Within the primal chaos Shenzhen, as long as it wasn't a particularly formal occasion, they were very amiable. It was normal for them to joke around. Morongyu said with a serious expression, there are definitely god's tribulation elixirs, but I can only refine a small amount each time. However, every one of you can become a god. Everyone in the Shenzhen can become a god. This is the promise I made to you when I established the Shenzhen. This is the promise I made to you when you submitted to me and followed me. I, Morongyu, won't mistreat anyone. Some of you followed me in the immortal world, but a large portion of you started following me from the cultivation world. You've walked the path from the peak of the cultivation world to the peak of the immortal world. The immortal world is definitely not your end, nor is it my end. Our pursuit is to become the strongest in the world. As long as I'm here, I won't mistreat you. Becoming a god is only the starting point for us. Everyone's expression turned solemn, and then they all became excited. It wasn't because Morongyu had a large amount of god's tribulation elixirs, but because of Morongyu's words. Following such a master, even being a dog was better than being a tyrant in other factions. Moreover, Morongyu had never seen them as servants, but as brothers, sisters, and a family. Chapter 795. In the depths of the southern sea of the immortal world, there was a continent the size of several large continents. The originally desolate continent was filled with demonic beasts, but now hundreds of thousands of people had appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, these people weren't weak. The weakest among them was an immortal emperor. Why did hundreds of thousands of immortal emperors suddenly appear in this place? Could it be that a treasure had appeared here? Xiahou, do you have any last words? Morongyu looked at Xiahou, who was about to undergo the divine tribulation, and asked with a smile. Apart from Morongyu, the others were also looking at Xiahou with a smile. This made Xiahou gloomy. Sacred Lord, and all of you, I, Xiahou, truly despise all of you. I am undergoing a tribulation, a divine tribulation. Not only are you not giving me your blessings, you are actually, I am really sad. Xiahou said with a grin. How could he be sad? On the contrary, his face was full of excitement. All right, go and undergo the tribulation. Don't try to be brave. Morongyu's voice became heavy. Xiahou nodded and then laughed loudly. Just wait and see. I will be Shenzhen's second quasi-god. When the time comes, I will come back and torture all of you. While speaking, Xiahou's figure flashed and was hundreds of millions of miles away from Morongyu. Finally, he floated in the void. Divine tribulation. Once I pass it, I will ascend to become a god. If I fail, my soul will scatter. 99 no return soul, extinguishing tribulation. Come. Xiahou roared in his heart and triggered the divine tribulation. Divine tribulation could be triggered by any expert who had reached the late immortal emperor realm. Moreover, other than initiating the divine tribulation would descend on its own. However, if the person undergoing the divine tribulation didn't want to undergo it, they could seal the divine tribulation that would descend on their own. Of course, this seal wasn't a real seal. It only temporarily cut off the connection of the divine tribulation. In other words, The divine tribulation was suppressed and delayed. However, once the connection was cut off, the person wouldn't be able to trigger the divine tribulation in the immortal emperor realm. In order to trigger the divine tribulation, one must reach the late immortal venerable realm. Rumble. The moment Xiahou triggered the divine tribulation, the entire continent was enveloped by a boundless black tribulation cloud that blotted out the sky. A terrifying might of heaven and earth was unleashed from afar, suppressing the myriad of worlds. Countless bolts of tribulation lightning came crashing down with a loud explosion. With Xiahou at the center, an area of 1 billion kilometers was filled with tribulation lightning. The terrifying tribulation thunder contained a terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and the earth. It tore the void apart, shattered everything, and destroyed everything. What terrifying tribulation lightning! The expressions of the spectators in the distance changed slightly at the sight of Xiaohu's tribulation. Except for those who had already reached the immortal venerable realm and were subdued by Murongyu. The rest of them had climbed up step by step from the bottom. It had not been long since they became experts, so they did not have the chance to witness the divine tribulation. As a matter of fact, very few people in the world of immortals underwent their tribulations. Even if he wanted to transcend the tribulation, he had to go to a desolate place by himself. Otherwise, if someone deliberately sabotaged him, this is 1,000,000 times more terrifying than a 6 and 9 heavenly tribulation. Is this the divine tribulation? It's only the first wave, and it's already so terrifying? There are 81 waves of tribulation lightning in the entire divine tribulation. The people around Murong, you couldn't help but turn pale with fright. The same was true for the immortal venerables. They knew that if they triggered the divine tribulation, it would be even more terrifying. Of course, not just any immortal venerable could trigger the divine tribulation unless they reached the late immortal venerable realm. There's nothing to be afraid of. Cultivation is a path that defies the heavens. Once you transcend the divine tribulation, you'll become a god and dominate the world. Heavenly tribulation isn't the only obstacle on the path of cultivation. There are many other tribulations as well. If you're afraid now, you won't be able to achieve great things in the end. The path of cultivation is a path that defies the heavens. It requires great courage, wisdom, and courage to face difficulties head-on. Among the crowd, only Murongyu remained calm. At this moment, his slightly cold voice resounded in everyone's ears. It even resounded in Xiaohu's ears. Everyone's hearts trembled and their minds jolted. They all came to their senses. It's just a divine tribulation. If you can't transcend it, you'll just turn into ashes. What's there to be afraid of? Xiahou, who was in the middle of transcending the tribulation, was shocked as well. His face had turned pale from the terrifying might of the divine tribulation. But now he had calmed down. He increased his strength and began to resist the first wave of heavenly tribulation. Hong long. Endless tribulation lightning struck down, drowning Xiahou in an instant. So what if it's a divine tribulation? I'll shatter it. Xiahou let out a loud roar. The energy in his body burst forth. Surging energy burst forth as he punched out. Bang, bang, bang. His divine fist was invincible. Under the effect of Xiahou's terrifying strength, the first wave of tribulation lightning was shattered. However, the second wave of tribulation lightning soon struck down, not giving Xiahou a chance to catch his breath. Xiahou was extremely ferocious. The second wave of tribulation lightning was shattered by his violent strength. Xiahou had also safely transcended the third wave. Although Xiahou had transcended the 10th wave, it was extremely difficult for him to withstand it. When it came to the 11th wave, Xiahou had already unleashed his emperor weapon and narrowly survived the first wave of tribulation lightning. What a terrifying divine tribulation. It's only the 11th wave. It seems that with Xiahou's strength, he can only transcend the 20th wave. He won't be able to transcend beyond that. Moron Yu frowned slightly. He did not expect the divine tribulation to be so terrifying. The others' faces turned pale as they watched nervously. Indeed, Xiahou Zhuo had only managed to transcend the 20th wave of heavenly tribulation after giving it his all. At this moment, he was in a sorry state. His clothes were torn and his body was pitch black. It was a tragic sight. However, his strength had not been depleted for long. After all, before transcending the tribulation, Moron Yu had given him countless ninth-grade immortal meridians. Even if his body was shattered, his strength would not be exhausted. Rumble, the 21st wave of tribulation, lightning, finally struck down. Xiahou Zhuo smiled bitterly as he felt the terrifying might of heaven and earth. I'm still not strong enough after all. This divine tribulation is not meant to help one transcend the tribulation to become a god, but to completely destroy cultivators. At this moment, Xiahou Zhuo was not the only one who had such thoughts. Even Moron Yu and the others felt the same way. As a cultivator who defied the heavens, heaven and earth did not allow them to become stronger. Therefore, heavenly tribulation would descend at every stage to prevent the cultivator from advancing further. The will of heaven and earth was simply too unfair to low-level cultivators. However, this was the way the world was. Where is the fairness to speak of? Damned heavens, one day I, Xiahou Zhuo, will crush you. No, follow my lord and crush you, damned heavens. Xiahou Zhuo suddenly roared. At the same time, he flipped his hand and threw a divine tribulation pill into his mouth. He had no choice but to swallow the pill. If he continued to resist, he might be directly destroyed by the tribulation lightning. Not even a speck of him would be left. Crush the heavens. Moron Yu was stunned when he heard Xiahou Zhuo's words. He had always wanted to be strong, but he had never thought that he would one day crush the heavens. With the heavenly punishment token, he knew how terrifying the heavens were. Was it possible to surpass the heavens and crush it beneath his feet? However, Xiahou Zhuo's words gave rise to a crazy idea in Moron Yu's mind. He wanted to crush the heavens and crush the world. He wanted to become the strongest person in this world. Even the heavens would tremble beneath his feet. He wanted to control everything and even the heavens. I wonder if the divine tribulation pill will work. When Xiahou Zhuo swallowed the divine tribulation pill, everyone looked at Xiahou Zhuo. Even Xiahou Zhuo felt uneasy. Bang! The divine tribulation pill melted as soon as it entered his mouth. An extremely powerful force immediately flowed through Xiahou Zhuo's limbs and bones. Then, Xiahou Zhuo saw a faint barrier rise from his body. It seemed to contain the power of the heavenly tribulation. Rumble, endless tribulation, lightning continued to strike down. It wouldn't disappear just because Xiahou Zhuo swallowed the divine tribulation pill. Xiahou Zhuo nervously looked at the tribulation lightning around him. He raised his strength to the maximum. The moment he realized that the divine tribulation pill didn't work, he would use his own strength to resist the tribulation lightning. However, what shocked him the most was that, suddenly, Xiahou Zhuo, who was engulfed by the tribulation lightning, began to laugh maniacally. At the same time, a few experts saw Xiahou Zhuo in the center of the tribulation lightning through the endless tribulation lightning. At that moment, Xiahou Zhuo's entire body had conjured a faint protective barrier. When the tribulation lightning struck his body, it automatically avoided it. The divine tribulation pill allowed one to transcend the first level of the tribulation. Is this how one can avoid the tribulation lightning? Moron Yu's heart stirred. He finally understood how the divine tribulation pill worked. However, although one can avoid the first level of tribulation lightning like this, the tribulation lightning's tempering cannot be tempered. However, the tribulation lightning's power can't temper the body. Even if one successfully transcends the tribulation, there's still a large gap between them and those who directly transcend the tribulation. Moron Yu pondered. In truth, Moron Yu was overthinking things. Strength could be cultivated, but one only had one life. As long as one transcended the tribulation and became a god, wouldn't one be able to slowly cultivate their strength back? Bang! The 21st level of tribulation lightning vanished, and the barrier around Xiao's body vanished into thin air as well. As expected, a single divine tribulation pill allowed one to transcend the first level of the tribulation. The divine tribulation pill worked. Xiahou Zhuo roared with laughter and yelled maniacally, "Divine tribulation, come at me," with even more ferocity. Amidst his frenzied yelling, Xiahou Zhuo swallowed one divine tribulation pill after another as he transcended one level of tribulation after another. Under the effects of the divine tribulation pill, Xiahou Zhuo easily transcended the tribulation and became a quasi-god. Chapter 796. Quasi-God Realm. 5 million dragons of earth power. Ha ha! I've finally become a quasi-god. I feel like I can tear open the void of the world of immortals and directly ascend to the god realm. Xiahou was stopped in place and laughed wildly. Indeed, a quasi-god like Xiahou Zhuo was different from a quasi-god like Murongyu, who had yet to undergo his divine tribulation. Those who hadn't undergone their tribulation couldn't sense the god realm and couldn't tear open the void between the god realm and the world of immortals to ascend. After undergoing their tribulation, they would have a faint connection with the god realm. They could tear open the void at any time and ascend to the god realm. In other words, if Xiahou Zhuo wanted to ascend, he could do so at any time. However, if he dared to ascend, Murongyu wouldn't show him any mercy. After all, the quasi-god expert he'd nurtured was helping him unify the world of immortals. On the other hand, if he ascended without doing anything after reaching the quasi-god realm, Murongyu would kill him before he could ascend. Murongyu had the ability to do so. Aside from Murongyu, the several 100,000 people on the continent all looked at Xiahou Zhuo with envious gazes as he laughed wildly. Successfully undergoing his tribulation meant that Xiahou Zhuo had a longer lifespan and greater strength than them. Unknowingly, there was a huge gap between their statuses. After all, one was a god and the other an immortal. No matter how powerful an immortal was, he couldn't compare to a god. Sacred Master, I succeeded. Xiahou Zhuo suppressed his excitement after laughing wildly for a while. He took a step forward and crossed hundreds of millions of space-time to arrive beside Murongyu. At the same time, he gave the remaining 100 or so God Tribulation pills to Murongyu. He'd only started taking God Tribulation pills at the 21st Tribulation. Each tribulation only required one God Tribulation pill, and he'd only used 61 of them. Not bad. Find some time to consolidate your strength. Murongyu nodded and looked at the experts beside him. They were all looking at Murongyu with fervent gazes. To be precise, they were looking at the God Tribulation pills in Murongyu's hands. These God Tribulation pills could be used to create another quasi-god. Black Tiger, Murongyu suddenly shouted. Here! Heihu's figure blurred as he rushed in front of Murongyu with an extremely excited expression. Go undergo your tribulation. With that, Murongyu gave all the God Tribulation pills in his hand to Black Tiger. Black Tiger gave his thanks and left to undergo his tribulation. Seeing the Black Tiger go to transcend the divine tribulation, the envious looks on everyone's faces became even more intense. However, no one was jealous of him. This was because they all knew that they would also have God Tribulation pills and could also become gods. Because that was Murongyu's promise, a promise that he would never leave her. The power of the God's Tribulation pill was very strong. Black Tiger passed the God's Tribulation without any suspense and became a quasi-god. So far, including A.O. Feng, the Sage Sect had 4 quasi-god realm experts. After Black Tiger's tribulation, there were less than 81 God Tribulation pills left. To be on the safe side, Murongyu didn't want anyone else to undergo their tribulation. He put everyone into the Hichu Luoshu world and brought them back to Shenzhen. At the same time, Murongyu burned the pills and accelerated time. This allowed Xiahou Zhuo and Black Tiger to consolidate their quasi-god strength. Shenzhen, inside the Sacred Palace. Sacred Lord, our Shenzhen now has 4 quasi-gods. Should we make an official appearance? Should we announce to the public that we're the 3rd strongest faction in the immortal realm? Xiahou Zhuo took a step forward and asked in a low voice. That's right. Our Shenzhen is already worthy of being the 3rd strongest faction in the immortal realm. It's time for us to make an official announcement. The others chimed in. Morongyu gestured with his hands in front of him. After everyone had calmed down, he continued, although our sacred sect already has 4 quasi-god experts, we're still a quasi-god. However, we're still inferior to the Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance. According to my estimates, there are at least 10 quasi-gods on both sides. Moreover, the Divine Union's leader and the Immortal Realm Alliance's sect masters are all mid-stage quasi-gods. I'm the only one in Shenzhen who has reached the mid-stage quasi-god realm. We're far from their match. Once we make an official announcement, both sides may join forces to suppress our Shenzhen in the cruelest way possible. If things go wrong, our Shenzhen will be destroyed. Therefore, our Shenzhen will definitely make an appearance, but it's not time yet. The God Tribulation pills I make every day are enough to make a quasi-god realm expert. Our Shenzhen will not only be the 3rd strongest faction in the immortal realm, but also the sole overlord of the immortal realm. We'll destroy the Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance. Once we make a move, it'll be earth-shattering. 1 quasi-god a day. Everyone grew excited. If we wait a few more years, won't we have thousands of quasi-gods? At that time, the demonic sect master, Tu Wan Xue, they'll all be wiped out. Everything will be destroyed. Everyone spoke excitedly, as if they could already see the Shenzhen sweeping through the immortal realm and destroying everything. In the following days, the people of Shenzhen worked even harder to cultivate. At this time, the matter at the Pill King continent was also over. The Supremacy Pill and the God's Tribulation Pill appeared. However, there weren't many of them, only a few of each. Even if G and the others got their hands on them, they wouldn't be able to cause much trouble. After all, they didn't have a heaven-defying treasure like the Yin-Yang Cauldron, so they couldn't mass-produce pills. Even if they did have a treasure like the Cauldron, they wouldn't know how to mass-produce pills. After all, they couldn't be like Morongyu, possessing an endless supply of immortal veins. As for the legendary God's Tribulation Pill, there was no such thing. Even if there was, Morongyu couldn't mass-produce it. He didn't have divine power. Condensing a divine spark required divine power. Without it, it was impossible to condense a divine spark. Therefore, even after an immortal successfully passed their tribulation, they had to go to the immortal realm to condense a divine spark and body. As for Morongyu's appearance in Dajo, the palace master and the others knew. However, they could only rage inwardly. They wanted to hunt down Morongyu, but where was Morongyu? They couldn't do anything to Morongyu. Moreover, they didn't know that the 3 captured were enforcers, or that Morongyu could control more cultivation worlds and increase his strength. If they knew, who knew what they'd think? For a moment, Morongyu had nothing to do. Increase his strength? That was impossible in a short time. Of course, if he refined more cultivation worlds, he could. However, Morongyu didn't know where more enforcers were. Half a month passed. By now, 17 quasi-gods had appeared in Shenzhen. Including Ao Feng, there were 18 quasi-gods. There are more and more quasi-gods, but my strength is still a bit low. If Ji and Liu Ran join forces, we still won't be able to hold them off. There must be someone in Shenzhen who can resist them, and that person can only be me. As for the other enforcers, they can only try their luck outside. Morongyu sighed and left Shenzhen. Within a certain location, Morongyu could sense other enforcers. Now, he was thinking of using the most stupid method to travel between the various continents of the immortal realm, trying to sense other enforcers while killing a large number of bad guys to earn points. These points were very useful and precious. Although he couldn't use them now, what about when he reached the divine realm? They would still be useful. Let's just take it as a trip. Morongyu flew from continent to continent, crossing one continent after another. However, other than the star points, he didn't find anything else. I wonder if there are enforcers in Kaijian City. Murong-yu flew across dozens of continents, but found nothing. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. The hope was really slim. Kaijian City was the headquarters of the Immortal Realm Alliance. Murong-yu had scruples and didn't dare to go to Kaijian City. Once he was discovered, he might not be able to leave Kaijian City. The Immortal Realm Alliance is taking action. Or are they working together with the Divine Union? Just as Murong-yu was considering whether to make a trip to Kaijian City, he suddenly received a spiritual message from Sun Haoshan. The Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance are actually working together? What's going on? Murong-yu was puzzled. He found it too inconceivable. Then, his figure flashed and disappeared from the spot, reappearing in the scout camp in Dazhou. Sun Haoshan, what's going on? Murong-yu asked directly. My lord, ever since the Elixir King continent incident, Ji and the others have gained very little. I vaguely sense that the two sides are working together and preparing to attack a forbidden area in order to obtain the divine essence in the forbidden area. Divine essence? Murong-yu was shocked. If they refined the divine essence, they would become a god. Although they wouldn't be able to obtain a higher level of power than if they refined the divine essence, they would still be a god. They would have a longer lifespan and greater power. If they really refined the divine essence, they would definitely be invincible in the immortal realm. No matter how strong an immortal was, they wouldn't be a match for a god. However, where would there be a divine essence in the immortal realm? My lord, I'm not sure about this either. I only vaguely know that their target is in a certain cultivation world. I'm also involved in this operation. I'm preparing to go to Kaijian City, Sun Haoshan said solemnly. Murong-yu's body shook violently. He couldn't help but think of the immortal tomb in the Huaxia cultivation world. No, it should be the tomb of the gods. If that really was the tomb of the gods, there should be a divine essence inside. However, the flow of time in the tomb of the gods was so terrifying. How could they enter? Even though Murong-yu could use the spatial nomological laws to resist the flow of time, he had never thought of entering the tomb of the gods. Of course, if Ji and the others dared to enter the Huaxia cultivation world, they would have to wash their necks clean for Murong-yu to kill. Chapter 797. Do you know which cultivation realm they're going to? Murong-yu narrowed his eyes as he asked Sun Haoshan. Sun Haoshan shook his head. Even though he was one of the higher-ups in the Immortal Realm Alliance and the commander of the scout camp, he had no right to know about this. However, Murong-yu was a little surprised that Sun Haoshan had the right to go to that cultivation realm. However, when he thought deeper about it, Murong-yu couldn't help sneering in his heart. Sun Haoshan did have the right to go to that cultivation realm miracle. However, if godhoods really appeared, he wouldn't have a share. He would only be cannon fodder there. Obviously, even if there were godhoods in the miracle, there wouldn't be a lot. There wouldn't even be enough for Ji Yunshu and the others. How could they share them with the people below them? When Murong-yu asked with a sneer, gather at Kaijian City in 3 days. Then, we will enter the cultivation realm together with the Divine Union. That's enough time. Murong-yu nodded with a cold look in his eyes. If there really was a godhead this time around, Murong-yu would definitely get involved in it. Of course, if they really entered the divine tomb of the Huaxia cultivation realm, Murong-yu sneered in his heart. He wouldn't show any mercy and would definitely catch all of them in one fell swoop. My lord, when will it be enough? I'm going to Kaijian City soon. Sun Haoshan looked at Murong-yu strangely, not understanding what he meant. I'm afraid you also know that you are going to the cultivation realm as cannon fodder. However, how could I let them have their way? If there are godhoods, they will be ours, Murong-yu said indifferently. Although he didn't need these godhoods, he definitely wouldn't allow anyone to become a god in the immortal realm. If someone became a god here and became an enemy of Murong-yu, then Murong-yu's life would definitely be difficult. Sun Haoshan was still puzzled. He didn't know what Murong-yu's words had to do with enough time. However, he knew that Murong-yu was preparing to seize the godhead. However, Even though Murong Yu was very strong, the Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance had practically turned out in full force this time. Thus, no matter how strong Murong Yu was, he wouldn't be able to obtain it. Moreover, after the incident on the Pilking continent, Ji Hao and the others would definitely be on guard against Murong Yu. Moreover, if Murong Yu also appeared in the cultivation world this time, Sun Haoshan and the others would definitely be exposed. I know you have your doubts, but I won't be going alone this time. Even if the Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance come out in full force, I will still make them suffer heavy losses. At the same time, the Hichu Luoshu rolled up, and Sun Haoshan was immediately sucked into the Hichu Luoshu world. When they reappeared, they were already on a continent in the South Sea. It was the continent where Xiahou Zhua had undergone his tribulation. My lord, this is... Sun Haoshan was puzzled. This is the God Tribulation Pill. You can undergo your tribulation now and become a quasi-god. I will go and bring Nangong Jun and the others over now. After Murong Yu gave Sun Haoshan 100 God Tribulation Pills, he ignored Sun Haoshan's shock and disappeared once again. God Tribulation Pill. It is indeed the God Tribulation Pill. I didn't expect my lord to be able to mass-produce the God Tribulation Pill. This time, Shenzhen will definitely rise. Sun Haoshan laughed heartily. I can also undergo my tribulation and become a true god. It won't be a problem for me to ascend in the future. Ha ha! Sun Haoshan laughed wildly. It took him a long time to suppress the excitement and agitation in his heart. Then, he triggered the God Tribulation. Layers of tribulation, lightning struck down continuously as Sun Haoshan began his God Tribulation. At the same time, Murong Yu also brought over the late-stage immortal venerables he had subdued. Nangong Jun, Nangong Longfeng, Shun Honggang, Han Lin, and the others were all present. Including Sun Haoshan, there were a total of 8 people. All of them were the higher-ups of the Immortal Realm Alliance. Moreover, all of them were going to the cultivation world this time. Once all of them became quasi-god experts, they would erupt with the strength of a quasi-god at the same time when their godheads appeared. They would definitely be able to catch the Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance unprepared. They might even be able to kill Ji and the others. The God Tribulation was very scary. However, it wasn't scary at all with the help of the God Tribulation Pill. Everyone present had successfully passed their tribulations and were now known as quasi-gods. At the same time, Murong Yu also made use of Hichu Luoshu's acceleration to speed up time so that Sun Haoshan and the others could consolidate their cultivation base and strength. Then, he sent them back one by one. Let's go to the city. Murong Yu possessed Sun Haoshan's body. Then, Sun Haoshan headed towards the city. He had originally intended to go to the city. This time, it just so happened that Sun Haoshan and the others were going as well, saving him the trouble of taking the risk alone. Sun Haoshan and the other powerhouses in Dazhou City went over at the same time. All of them were late-stage immortal venerates. Their cultivation bases had been sealed by Murong Yu. Even Ji couldn't tell that they weren't late-stage immortal venerates, but quasi-gods. Of course, if they wanted to, they could erupt with the strength of a quasi-god at any time. Kaijian City was one of the top 10 cities in the immortal realm. It was similar to the South Mountain Range. This was Murong Yu's first time going to Kaijian City. Murong Yu was excited the moment he saw Kaijian City. It wasn't because this was his first time going to Kaijian City. Instead, he had sensed the aura of several origin sources of the cultivation world as soon as he had entered the city. 3 of them. There were a total of 3 enforcers. All of them were very powerful. The weakest of them was a mid-stage immortal venerate, while the last one was a late-stage immortal venerate. Their strength was very terrifying. The power of space rippled outwards. Murong Yu immediately grasped the aura left behind by the 3 enforcers in the void. This way, as long as they were still in the immortal realm and in the same space as Murong Yu, they wouldn't be able to shake off Murong Yu's pursuit. Murong Yu had originally thought that Sun Haoshan and the others would know the destination of this operation when they arrived at Kaijian City. However, to Murong Yu's disappointment, they hadn't revealed anything at all. They'd only told Sun Haoshan and the others to settle down in Kaijian City and wait for further instructions. Morong Yu pondered. Tu Wanxue, and a limited number of people knew the details now. Sun Haoshan and the others' positions were still too low. Sun Haoshan, go get the 3 enforcers first. Since there was no news of this operation, Morong Yu could only set his sights on the 3 enforcers. As long as he refined a cultivation world controlled by these 3 people, his strength would skyrocket once again, and his power would become even more powerful. Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant was the most luxurious and high-end restaurant in Kaijian City. At this moment, Sun Haoshan had arrived at a private room on the 3rd floor of Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. Next to the private room were the 3 enforcers that Morong Yu had discovered. The 3 of them had actually gathered together. This made Morong Yu somewhat excited. If the 3 of them were scattered in Kaijian City, Morong Yu was afraid that he would be discovered by the experts in Kaijian City if he wanted to take action. However, the fact that the 3 of them had gathered together had created an opportunity for Morong Yu to capture them. I wonder why Palace Master has summoned us here. Among the 3 of them, an intermediate immortal venerable took a sip of wine and asked curiously, I'm not sure either. The other intermediate immortal venerable shook his head. Then, the 2 of them looked at the late immortal venerable with a mysterious smile. Do you know about the cultivation world of Huaxia? The late immortal venerable didn't say anything. Of course, the cultivation world of Huaxia is one of the top 3 super cultivation worlds among the 36 cultivation worlds. What does our coming here have to do with the cultivation world of Huaxia? We aren't the enforcers of Huaxia, one of the intermediate immortal venerable asked. Although we aren't the enforcers of Huaxia, we are still the enforcers. Do you know why Palace Master has summoned us here? The smile on the late immortal venerable's face became more mysterious. Why? The 2 intermediate immortal venerables asked in unison. Cultivation world of Huaxia? Morong Yu frowned slightly and continued to listen. I heard that Palace Master has summoned us here to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia and destroy it in one fell swoop. The late immortal venerable lowered his voice and said mysteriously. Morong Yu's body shook violently. Then, an incomparably strong, killing intent radiated from his body. He had a feeling that this late immortal venerable was telling the truth. If many cultivation worlds attacked Huaxia together, Morong Yu wouldn't be able to resist even with his monstrous strength. However, why would they attack Huaxia's cultivation world? That's right, that must be it. Morong Yu's heart was filled with anger. These people were attacking Huaxia's cultivation world because they wanted to deal with Morong Yu. The Palace Master of Heavenly Punishment Palace and the others knew that Morong Yu was an enforcer. Moreover, they suspected that the reason why Morong Yu's strength improved so quickly was because he was an enforcer. If they destroyed Huaxia's cultivation world, Morong Yu would naturally be affected. Moreover, he wouldn't be able to escape back to Huaxia's cultivation world. However, even if they destroy Huaxia's cultivation world, do they have the confidence to capture me? I have the Hichu Luoshu world. Could it be that they are plotting against Hichu Luoshu? No, they're doing this because of the Godhead. Could it be that they are attacking Huaxia's cultivation world because of the Godhead? Morong Yu's face was extremely gloomy. His killing intent filled the room. Yes, it must be because of the Tomb of the Gods. Since the Tomb of the Gods is the graveyard of the gods, there must be a Godhead in it. As long as Huaxia's cultivation world is not destroyed, they won't dare to enter. Therefore, if they want to enter Huaxia's cultivation world, they must first destroy it. Even if Huaxia's cultivation world is destroyed, the Tomb of the Gods will not disappear. What a sinister plan. Morong used killing intent sword. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He wanted to rush out and kill Lu Ran and the others. If Morong Yu hadn't controlled Sun Haoshan and the others, he wouldn't have known about this operation. If he hadn't sensed the other enforcers and wanted to subdue the 3 enforcers in Heavenly Fragrance House, he wouldn't have known about this sinister plan against Huaxia's cultivation world. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known why Huaxia's cultivation world would be destroyed. How sinister. You want to destroy Huaxia's cultivation world? This time, I'm going to make you suffer the consequences of your actions. However, the Heavenly Punishment Palace must have the information of all the enforcers. If the remaining enforcers all attack Huaxia's cultivation world, Murong Yu's back suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 798. Murong Yu had already controlled 12 cultivation realms, but there were 36 cultivation realms under the Yan Huang Immortal Realm. In other words, there were 24 cultivation realms under the control of the Heavenly Punisher Palace. If the Heavenly Punisher Palace gathered these 24 cultivation realms and used their power to attack the Huaxia world of cultivators, the Huaxia world of cultivators would definitely not be able to resist. It would be completely destroyed in an instant. Moreover, Murong Yu knew that he wasn't worrying for nothing. It would really happen. Murong Yu also believed that Ji and the others wouldn't show any mercy. I must stop their attack. Murong Yu's heart was filled with murderous intent. A strong sense of danger rose in him. He had to stop them before they attacked the Huaxia world of cultivators. Otherwise, the Huaxia world of cultivators would definitely be destroyed. However, those enforcers weren't here at all. How could Murong Yu stop them? Stop Ji and the others? Although Murong Yu was strong, he couldn't stop Ji and the others. After all, no matter how strong he was, he only had the strength of 6 million Earth Dragons. There was still a gap between him and Ji. Sun Haoshan, is this true? Murong Yu looked at Sun Haoshan with a gloomy face. Sun Haoshan's face was blank. He knew nothing about the news that the late Immortal Venerable had told him. Not only that, the enforcers under Murong Yu's control hadn't received this news either. If Sun Haoshan and the others didn't know, how did the late Immortal Venerable know? Moreover, Murong Yu felt that what the late Immortal Venerable said was absolutely true. No matter what, I'll take down the 3 enforcers first. Murong Yu's eyebrows flashed with a cold light. He took a step forward and disappeared from the private room. When he reappeared, he was already in the private room of the 3 enforcers. You! Seeing the sudden appearance of Murong Yu and Sun Haoshan, the 3 enforcers were instantly shocked. When they felt Murong Yu's undisguised killing intent, the 3 of them, boom! A loud sound rang out, and a terrifying aura burst out from the bodies of the 3 people and squeezed towards Murong Yu. At the same time, the 3 of them unleashed their strongest attacks, ruthlessly bombarding Murong Yu. He was truly decisive in his killing, without any hesitation. Suppress. Murong Yu didn't even look at it. With a low growl, he stretched out his hand and pressed it down. Bang! 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 Immediately, the 3 enforcers felt the power they had unleashed shatter like dust, instantly vanishing without a trace. In fact, even their terrifying auras were the same. The 3 of them were instantly horrified. Just as they were about to react, Murong Yu's large hand had already suppressed them. The big hand didn't touch any of them, but the 3 of them felt as if they were being suppressed by a big hand. A powerful force gushed out and sealed their strength. Their whole body fell to the ground with a plop sound. 3 enforcers were suppressed in one move. The 3 of them were shocked and furious. They roared and were about to use their origin energy to escape back to the cultivation world. However, before they could escape, they were shocked to find that a force was drawn into their dantian. The origin energy of the cultivation world that had been in their dantian was forcefully taken out by the force. Puff! Their origin energy was forcefully taken away, and their minds were immediately shaken. They couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, each of them looked at Murong Yu with resentment. However, their venomous gazes quickly turned into pious gazes. This was because Murong Yu had already extracted their souls in an instant and directly controlled them. Stay normal, don't let the cat out of the bag. Murong Yu instructed, and then disappeared from the spot with Sun Haoshan. Sun Haoshan returned to the private room at the side, and Murong Yu entered the Hichu Luoshu world and began to refine the 3 cultivation worlds. Half a day later, Murong Yu reappeared beside Sun Haoshan. At this time, he had already refined the 3 cultivation worlds and his strength had skyrocketed. At this point, Muronyu had already controlled 15 cultivation worlds, which was close to half of the 36 cultivation worlds in the Yin Huang cultivation world. However, this was far from enough. More than 6 million Earth Dragons of power, but I haven't broken through to 7 million. I haven't broken through to the late quasi-God realm. Muronyu's face was still gloomy. Even though his strength had broken through again and was infinitely close to 7 million Earth Dragons of power, he still couldn't feel happy. After all, if he couldn't solve this problem, so what if his strength reached 10 million Earth Dragons of power? This time, after refining and controlling 3 cultivation worlds, his strength had reached the limit. He only needed 1 more Earth Dragon of power to reach 7 million Earth Dragons of power. However, this was also the limit of his current cultivation realm. If he wanted to break through to 7 million Earth Dragons of power, he had to enter the intermediate Immortal Emperor realm. As long as his cultivation realm didn't break through, his strength couldn't continue to grow. However, now that I'm infinitely close to the late quasi-God realm, I believe that no one can be my opponent except Danji. Heavenly Penalty Palace Master? Palace Master of the Immortal Palace? Muronyu sneered and appeared in the private room of the 3 enforcers again. My lord. Seeing Muronyu come, the 3 enforcers hurriedly stood up and bowed respectfully. The difference was too big compared to before when they were shouting and yelling about killing. Shirue, tell me in detail what's going on. Is the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master really going to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia? Muronyu sat down with a gloomy face. My lord, I'm not very sure. However, I do know that the Palace Master has summoned us to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia. I don't know the specific reason. Shirue, who was the late Immortal Venerable, answered respectfully. What Shirue said was true, which made Muronyu's heart even heavier. Do you know where the other enforcers are? Muronyu asked again. Shirue shook his head and said, My lord, the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master has summoned the enforcers a long time ago. If I'm not wrong, some enforcers have already arrived in Kaijian City. Muronyu pondered. Kaijian City was huge, but as long as the enforcers appeared in Kaijian City, he could sense the chi of the origin energy. Apart from Shirue and the other 2, Muronyu didn't sense the chi of other enforcers. If Danji and the others really wanted to destroy the cultivation world of Huaxia, they would have summoned a large number of enforcers to try to destroy the cultivation world of Huaxia. And these enforcers would definitely gather in Kaijian City. However, at present, there weren't many enforcers in Kaijian City. There were 2 possibilities. One was that the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master didn't summon them, and the other was that they all came. But they were controlled by someone or put into a space treasure like the Hichu Luoshu world. In that case, Muronyu couldn't sense the chi of the origin energy on them. Or perhaps they had already returned to their respective cultivation realms. As long as the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master gave the order, they would begin to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia. And Muronyu finally knew that they didn't want to use Sun Haoshan as cannon fodder, but they wanted Sun Haoshan to attack the cultivation world of Huaxia. As for Nangong Jun and the others, they were probably really cannon fodder. Thinking of this, Muronyu's back was drenched in cold sweat. The situation was getting more and more serious. If they were careless, the cultivation world of Huaxia would be destroyed. And most importantly, there were so many people in the cultivation world of Huaxia. Muronyu couldn't move all of them. Even if he could move all of them to the Hichu Luoshu world, Muronyu didn't want to do that. He didn't want to lose the cultivation world of Huaxia because it was Muronyu's hometown. It couldn't be destroyed. The only way now is to control the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master. Muronyu made up his mind. He was ready to attack Tong Qing, the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master, in the branch of the Heavenly Penalty Palace in Kaijian City. Tong Qing, the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master, was here. Get out of my way. I need to see the Palace Master for something urgent. After Sun Haoshan entered the Heavenly Penalty Palace, he strode toward Tong Qing. However, he was stopped on the way. The Heavenly Penalty Palace Master was one of the 4 leaders of the Alliance of the Immortal Realm. How could he meet her so easily? Sun Haoshan, although you are the commander of the Scout Battalion and one of the higher-ups of the Alliance, this is only the Heavenly Penalty Palace Master. You're just an ordinary elder. If you want to see the Palace Master, you'll need his permission. Plus, the Palace Master is in seclusion now. Don't disturb him. I have news about Morongyu. Get out of my way. Sun Haoshan's face was gloomy as he strode forward. How dare you? Men, take him down. The late immortal venerable who stopped Sun Haoshan shouted. Immediately, countless figures flew over from all directions, pouncing on Sun Haoshan. Get out of my way. Sun Haoshan roared. The chi of the quasi-god realm erupted from his body. Asterisk Hong. 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 Asterisk before those figures could get close to Sun Haoshan. They were sent flying by Sun Haoshan's terrifying strength. The speed at which they were sent flying was several times faster than the speed at which they came. At the same time, Sun Haoshan took a step forward and rushed into the depths of the Heavenly Penalty Palace, where the Palace Master was in seclusion. Stop, all of you. Sun Haoshan, what's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry? A figure appeared in front of Sun Haoshan. It was the Palace Master of the Heavenly Penalty Palace, Tong Qing. However, when he saw that Sun Haoshan had already broken through to the quasi-god realm, he couldn't help but feel happy. At this time, with one more quasi-god realm expert, the Heavenly Punisher Palace's strength would skyrocket, and it could even suppress the Immortal Palace, Holy Gate, and Devil's Sect in one fell swoop. Tong Qing could also use this opportunity to become the true Alliance Chief of the Immortal World Alliance and control the entire Immortal World Alliance. Chapter 799. After ordering the people of the Heavenly Penalty Palace to leave, Tong Qing brought Sun Haoshan to the secret room where he cultivated. Originally, he was angry because of Sun Haoshan. However, when he saw that Sun Haoshan was already a quasi-god, he was not angry at all. Instead, he became quite enthusiastic. Sun Haoshan, you said you have news about Morongyu? Tong Qing asked quickly after entering the secret room. He was very interested in Morongyu. In fact, he was only interested in Morongyu's Hichu Luo Shu. I heard that Palace Master is going to attack the Huaxia self-cultivators soon. If that's the case, then we might not be able to do anything to Morongyu. Sun Haoshan's words were shocking, causing Tong Qing to be thoroughly shocked. How did you know? Tong Qing's face changed. Traces of murderous intent seeped out. His divine sense locked onto Sun Haoshan, intending to kill him. Only 5 people knew about this. They were the 4 leaders of the Ji Dynasty and Immortal World. No one else knew. How did Sun Haoshan know? Who leaked it out? You're really going to attack the Huaxia self-cultivators. Damn it. Morongyu, who was attached to Sun Haoshan's body, was full of murderous intent. He couldn't wait to kill Tong Qing. However, he hadn't achieved his goal yet, so he wouldn't act rashly. It doesn't matter if I know or not. Palace Master, if I'm not wrong, you want us executors to attack together and destroy the Huaxia self-cultivators, right? Although you're powerful, you can't do anything to the self-cultivators. Tong Qing's face turned cold. He looked at Sun Haoshan coldly and nodded slightly. Obviously, since Sun Haoshan dared to ask this, he already knew about it. Even if Tong Qing denied it, it wouldn't help. If we want to destroy the Huaxia self-cultivators in one fell swoop, we need at least a dozen executors to attack together. Palace Master, you control all the executors. Gathering them together is a piece of cake. However, I want to ask you, Palace Master, are these executors reliable? Do they really take orders from you? Tong Qing looked at Sun Haoshan with a gloomy expression and asked in a deep voice, Sun Haoshan, what do you mean by that? What does this have to do with the information you mentioned about Morongyu? Sun Haoshan smiled faintly and said, of course it's related, and it's a big one. Do you know that a considerable number of the enforcers have already been controlled by Morongyu? When the time comes for you to launch your attack, how many people will actually attack the Huaxia world of cultivation? What? Tong Qing jumped in fright. and looked at Sun Haoshan in shock. Murong, you can actually control the enforcers? That's impossible. More than a dozen punishers are already in place. They're just waiting for my order, and they'll completely destroy the Huaxia cultivation world. As expected, in the Hichu, Luoshu world, Murong Yu frowned. These people had already returned to their respective cultivation realms. This was really difficult. As long as Tongqing gave the order, they would attack. Also, I don't know which cultivation realms they're from. It's almost all the remaining cultivation realms. I have no choice but to kill Tongqing. Once Tongqing is killed, he won't be able to give any orders to the enforcers, and the Huaxia world of cultivation will not be attacked. Sun Haoshan, how do you know so much? Could it be that you're... At this moment, Tongqing's killing intense soared, and he was about to attack Sun Haoshan. That's right. Sun Haoshan is one of the enforcers under my control. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded in the secret room. Boom! When the voice rang out, a monstrous and incomparably powerful aura burst out. A huge fist that contained a terrifying aura that could destroy the world came crashing down from the sky towards Tongqing, intending to kill him. At the same time, Sun Haoshan also roared. He crossed his hands and launched his strongest attack towards Tongqing. Murong Yu, it's you. You're courting death. Tongqing was indeed a super expert at the quasi-god realm. He immediately raised his strength to the limit. Rumble, waves of terrifying aura burst out from his body, forming a huge shield around him. At the same time, the powerful aura swept out in all directions like a tide. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the entire secret room was shattered by the power that he had unleashed. At the same time, the power of both sides collided fiercely. There was an earth-shattering sound. A shockwave that was thousands of times more terrifying than before swept out in all directions with the place where they fought as the center. The terrifying power wreaked havoc. In the blink of an eye, the entire heavenly punishing palace in the middle of the city was shattered into pieces. Countless experts of the heavenly punishing palace were directly killed and exploded into clouds of blood mist. These people did not even know how they died. Only a few super experts at the late immortal venerable realm were lucky enough to escape. Almost at the same time, 3 figures were sent flying out from the depths of the ground. Strictly speaking, it was only 2 figures that were sent flying. One was Sun Haoshan, and the other was Tongqing, who was killed by Murong Yu's sneak attack. Although Sun Haoshan was a quasi-god realm expert, Tongqing had reached the intermediate quasi-god realm. There was a difference of 1 million dragon power between them. Even though Sun Haoshan had sneak attacked Tongqing, he was also sent flying by Tongqing's powerful strength. As for Murong Yu, he was much stronger than Tongqing. There was almost a difference of 1 million dragon power between them. With such a huge difference, he could easily crush Tongqing. Therefore, after Tongqing was sent flying by his punch, his body swayed slightly, and he chased after Tongqing. How is this possible? You become so much stronger. How is this possible? Tongqing was shocked by Murong Yu's powerful strength. The blood in his body churned like a raging river. His muscles, bones, and organs were almost shattered. He looked at Murong Yu with a face full of shock. Not long ago, in the Pill King continent, although Murong Yu was powerful, he was only on par with him. In fact, Murong Yu wasn't even as strong as him. But how long had it been since they last met? Murong Yu's strength had increased by almost 1 million dragon power. As soon as they started fighting, Tongqing was at a disadvantage. Although Murong Yu had the advantage of sneak attack, if it wasn't for Murong Yu's strength, how could he have hurt Tongqing? Nothing is impossible. Since you want to attack the Huaxia self-cultivators, you can go to hell. Murong Yu was furious. With one step, he crossed countless dimensions, appeared in front of Tongqing, and punched out. Boom! Tongqing also punched out, but Murong Yu's strength was too strong. Tongqing was sent flying with one punch. This time, it wasn't his sneak attack. Tongqing had raised his strength to the limit, but Murong Yu's punch almost shattered his arm. You want to kill me? You're still too naive. Tong Qing finally steadied himself after smashing through countless dimensions. Immediately, he laughed savagely, and his body shook violently. In the next moment, Muronyu saw countless stars twinkle in the sky. Beams of stellar energy poured down like rain and entered Tong Qing's body. How strange. It was daytime now. Aside from the dazzling golden sun in the sky, how could there be any stars? But at this moment, Muronyu and everyone else in the city saw stars appear in the sky. It was like a clear night sky. What's going on? Everyone in the city had already been awakened by the shock waves from the fight between Murongyu's group of three. Now, they were even more puzzled. Only a few people's expressions changed. This is the astral domain, that old bastard Tong Qing's domain. Lu Ran flew into the air, her expression changing. Astral domain, who attacked old bastard Tong Qing, who forced old bastard Tong Qing to use his astral domain. Although the astral domain is powerful and strange, it can kill everything, but it consumes a lot of energy. From the looks of it, if old devil Tong Qing isn't forced into a desperate situation, then he must be trying to kill his opponent. The Holy Master of the Holy Gate and the Sect Master of the Devil's Sect also flew into the air. Looking at the twinkling stars in the sky, their expressions changed. The astral domain was extremely powerful. In the astral domain, Tong Qing was the absolute ruler and could destroy everything. And now, Tong Qing's astral domain had enveloped the entire Kaijian city. In other words, if he wanted to, he could destroy the city in an instant. Tu Wanshue and the other two looked at each other and moved closer. If Tong Qing wanted to kill them, although they were confident that they wouldn't be killed, they would inevitably be injured. Moreover, the three of them knew that they would have to kill each other sooner or later. Whether it was to become the leader of the Immortal World Alliance, the overlord of the Immortal World, or the Godhead, they would have to kill each other. Murongyu's expression changed. Of course, he didn't know that this was Tong Qing's astral domain. He had never heard of the astral domain, but he knew that among the 36 cultivation realms under the Yan Huang Immortal Realm, there was a cultivation realm called the Stellar Cultivation Realm. That cultivation realm was very powerful and ranked first among the 36 cultivation realms. It had always been so. Furthermore, Murongyu knew that the cultivation of the cultivators in that world was different from that of ordinary people. Ordinary people cultivated by absorbing the essence of heaven and earth. But the people of the stellar cultivation realm cultivated by absorbing the power of the stars. The people of the stellar cultivation realm were very powerful and were almost invincible in the immortal world. And Tong Qing wasn't just from the stellar cultivation realm. He was also the enforcer of the stellar cultivation realm. In fact, if he hadn't used the astral domain to let Murongyu feel the origin of the cultivation realm, Murongyu wouldn't even know that he was the enforcer of the stellar cultivation realm. Chapter 800. You hid so well that even I couldn't find you. Murongyu sneered inwardly as he watched Tong Qing's aura rise steadily after activating her astral domain. Tong Qing's strength continued to grow, and she gave off an extremely dangerous aura. Murongyu, you're good at controlling the punishment enforcer. However, so what if that was the case? You enter my star field today, and tomorrow will be your death anniversary. All of your treasures will change owners. Everything will be mine. Tong Qing looked at Murongyu coldly as she spoke. The greed in her eyes was extremely intense, and she didn't even bother to conceal it. If it weren't for Murongyu's treasures, Tong Qing definitely wouldn't have used her astral domain. After all, although the star field was powerful, it consumed a lot of energy every time it was used. After using the star field, he would be weak for a while. And in this immortal world, if he was weak, he would be in great danger. He might even be taken advantage of by others and killed while he was down. But today he used the star field. Tong Qing sneered and glanced at Lu Ran, Tu Wanshue, and the others who were also in the star field. Murderous intent was revealed. Who were Lu Ran and the others? They were super experts in the intermediate quasi-god realm and were very sensitive to auras. When Tong Qing looked at them, they narrowed their eyes and were filled with murderous intent. Lu Ran, the palace master of the Immortal Palace, said, "It seems that our old friend Tong Qing has something against us. It doesn't matter. We're not pushovers. Let's see how he's going to kill Murongyu. I guess you guys are also interested in Hichu Luoshu?" Lu Bai, the sacred leader of the Sacred Gate, said. However, the greed in his eyes was very obvious. "Huh, the one with the biggest fist gets the treasure." Tu Wanshua laughed and looked at Tong Qing and Murongyu in the distance. "It seems that you're ambitious. You seem to be very confident in yourself. You want to kill me in one move? I wonder where your confidence comes from." Murongyu sneered as he looked at Tong Qing. He didn't make a move. In fact, Murongyu was also a little nervous. Whenever it was a star field, the user was like a god in the field and could control everything. In the star field, Tong Qing was the master. However, Murongyu was not nervous about the star field. He was considering whether to kill Tong Qing in one move. Even the palace master of the Immortal Palace and the others take the opportunity to seize the power of the Immortal Realm Alliance. There are 8 quasi-god experts in the Immortal Realm Alliance, plus dozens of sage sect experts. Dozens of quasi-god experts should be enough to kill them. At the very least, they could be defeated. How dare you attack the Huaxiao world of cultivation? I didn't want to expose my strength so early. However, all of this was forced by you. Today, I'll let you see Shenzhen's power. In today's battle, I'll kill you and show Shenzhen's might. Murongyu was determined to use all his power to kill the Immortal Realm Alliance experts. As long as he killed Tong Qing and took his world of cultivation origin, he would be able to break through 7 million Earth Dragon power and reach the late-stage quasi-god realm. At that time, even the Ji clan would be no match for him. Moreover, as long as he killed Tong Qing, the enforcers would not attack the world of cultivation of Huaxia. Thinking of this, Murongyu suddenly roared, "Kill!" At the same time, he swallowed a bloodthirst pill. Although the pill didn't increase his power by much, it was better than nothing. At the same time, he raised the battle formula to the limit. In an instant, Murongyu's strength skyrocketed, breaking through to over 7 million Earth Dragons power. With a single step, the void shattered and large areas of it collapsed. Murongyu turned into a streak of light and shot toward Tong Qing. In the process, Murongyu made a grabbing motion and the Demortis sword appeared in his hand. Then, the exterminating celestial sword expanded with the wind. Like the Milky Way in the sky, it exploded with a destructive aura. It cut through the void and slashed at Tong Qing. Child's play, star power, evolution, annihilation. Tong Qing couldn't help sneering at Murongyu's sudden attack with a look of disdain. Without him making a move, the stars in the sky began to move. Boundless stellar energy poured down like raindrops, forming a starry greatsword. It fiercely slashed at Murongyu in the air. Boom! The two swords slammed into each other midway. Time seemed to stop at the moment of impact, but after 1,000th of a second, the two swords both shattered. The terrifying impact was formed instantly, and the surrounding void was torn apart like a piece of cloth. Murongyu's body shook, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Step by step, he left a footprint in the void, shattering it continuously. Tong Qing, who was on the other side, couldn't bear it and was sent flying. The huge sword formed by the power of stars was directly shattered into pieces. On the contrary, Murongyu's Demortis sword wasn't shattered. Only the sword radiance was shattered. How is this possible? Your power is so terrifying? Tong Qing was shocked and in disbelief. In the Star Realm, he was the ruler. That sword strike just now could absolutely kill any quasi-god powerhouse. However, the truth was that he had only forced Murongyu to take a few steps back. Tong Qing was shocked. Murongyu was also shocked. Such powerful power. I'm afraid it has exceeded 7 million Earth Dragon power. He shattered my attack with one strike. Murongyu was astonished. Just now, he'd used his full strength to launch that attack. If they weren't in the Star Realm, even 2 Tong Qings would have been killed. The Star Realm is only SOSO. Murongyu sneered and took a step forward to attack again. Tongqing's face was ferocious. Kid, don't think that you're powerful just because you block my attack. Now, I'll show you what power is and what the Star Realm is. Fall of the stars, destroy the heavens and earth, destroy the world. Tongqing suddenly roared. Instantly, everyone in the Star Realm was shocked to see the countless stars in the sky leaving their original positions and turning into meteors. They fell from the sky like a meteor shower and bombarded Murongyu. Meteors falling from the sky. This power is so terrifying. If these stars fall, we'll definitely die and Kaijian City will be destroyed. Seeing the meteors falling from the sky, everyone's face changed and they were in a panic. Tongqing, this bastard. Is he going to destroy Kaijian City? Seeing this, Tu Wanxue couldn't help but roar. As quasi-god experts, they all knew how terrifying these falling stars were. If it rained down, even 10 Kaijian cities would be destroyed. If Kaijian City was destroyed, then so be it. However, Kaijian City was the headquarters of the Immortal Realm Alliance. Almost all the experts of the Immortal Realm Alliance were gathered here. If these people were destroyed by the falling stars, the Immortal Realm Alliance would only exist in name. After all, what was the difference between the Immortal Realm Alliance without experts? However, Tongqing seemed to have realized his madness. Just as the falling stars fell, Murongyu and the others felt the space around them tremble slightly. Then they saw that they seemed to have flown into the sky, and Kaijian City below them was gone. Tongqing transferred the Star Realm away and no longer enveloped Kaijian City. If he wanted to control the Immortal Realm Alliance, he needed experts. He also didn't want to destroy the Immortal Realm Alliance. Murongyu raised his head to look at the incomparably huge stars that carried with them the power to destroy the heavens and earth. He couldn't help but feel astonished. These stars seemed to be real stars and not illusions of divine power. But could Tongqing pluck the real stars with his strength? In the Immortal Realm, even quasi-gods couldn't touch the stars at the top of the sky. It was just like the stars in the mortal world. No one could touch them, let alone pluck them. With Tongqing's strength, it was impossible for him to pluck the stars. I'll see if these stars are real or fake. Murongyu sneered. His body rose into the sky and rushed toward a falling star. At the same time, he threw a punch at it. The star was huge. Murongyu was like a particle in front of it. However, when Murongyu's punch landed on the star, it immediately exploded. However, Murongyu also suffered a huge impact. His whole body was shaken and his blood was boiling. Is this a real star? Isn't this star realm too magical? But so what if it's a real star? Tongqing, you think too highly of yourself and underestimate me if you want to kill me. Murongyu sneered. Just as he was about to take out the yin-yang cauldron, he felt the void around him freeze. An unknown force squeezed in from all directions, trying to imprison Murongyu. The power of space. Murongyu sneered in his heart. Playing with the rules of space in front of him was like showing off one's meager skills in front of an expert. In the next moment, Murongyu's body swayed and rushed out. However, no matter how one looked at it, his speed was unnatural. It was as though he was restrained by a force, and his speed was extremely slow. Haha, in the Star Realm, I am the ruler. Now I grant you death. Tongqing laughed out loud. A huge hand that was formed by the power of the stars slammed down on Murongyu. Murongyu sneered in his heart as he kept dodging the stars and the huge hand. However, no matter how one looked at it, his speed was getting slower and slower. However, unknowingly, the distance between Murongyu and Tongqing was growing smaller and smaller. He was slowly approaching Tongqing. However, Tongqing didn't notice it at all. Or rather, he noticed it but didn't care and didn't care at all. Was it because he felt that Murongyu was making a last-ditch effort? Or was he extremely confident in himself? Chapter 801. Murongyu's figure became more and more miserable as he dodged the meteors that came crashing down on him. However, He kept getting closer and closer to Tong Ching unknowingly. He was getting closer and closer to Tong Ching. At this moment, Tong Ching's face was still filled with disdain. It's too exhausting to maintain the realm. I can't go on like this, Tong Ching thought to himself. The realm was already exhausting. Moreover, the bigger the realm, the more powerful the expert in it was, and the more exhausting it would be for him. Although Tong Ching looked calm, he actually had no idea how many immortal meridians he had devoured to replenish his energy. Since that's the case, I shall destroy you. Heaven and earth annihilation. Tong Ching roared in his heart. Instantly, the realm was about to shatter, and everything was annihilated. The realm kept shattering and collapsing. Large areas turned into a primitive state of chaos, and everything was annihilated. Regardless of whether it was the stars or everything else, they were all annihilated rapidly. Tong Ching is going to be ruthless. Heaven and earth annihilation. Lu Ran's face turned pale as he looked at the annihilation of the realm and started increasing his power crazily. If this power was targeted at them, they knew that they were no match for Tong Ching, even if they were confident in their abilities. At least in the star realm, Tong Ching was the most powerful, unless he could destroy the astral domain. Almost at the moment when Tong Ching activated the heaven and earth annihilation, Murong Yu, who was not far away from him, looked at him and sneered. A bad feeling rose in Tong Ching's heart, but she didn't take it seriously. After all, he was the master of the star realm. However, in the next moment, Tong Ching's eyes widened by 1,000,000,000 times. That was because he saw Murong Yu suddenly disappear from his original spot. Before he could react, a huge fist with devastating power appeared out of nowhere. It smashed through space and charged out, slamming towards him viciously. Tong Ching was shocked. With a thought, endless power of the stars surged into his body and was about to form a shield. However, how could Tong Ching block Murong Yu's attack that he had been accumulating power for a long time? Wouldn't that be a waste of effort? Boom! Just as the power of the stars surged into Tong Ching's body, Murong Yu's God Fist had already landed on Tong Ching's body. The terrifying power instantly exploded, and the starry barrier around Tong Ching's body, which hadn't even formed yet, was shattered into dust without any suspense. Immediately after, an incomparably powerful force violently bombarded Tong Ching's body. At the same time, a fiery light flashed. Tong Ching let out a blood-curdling scream. Half of his body had been shattered by Murong Yu's punch. The tremendous power sent Tong Ching flying, even shattering the void. How is this possible? Everything happened too quickly. Only when Tong Ching was sent flying did Tu Wanxue and the others in the distance come to their senses. After regaining their senses, their first reaction was that it was impossible. Why isn't he restrained? Lu Bai's face was filled with shock. In the astral domain, their speed was restricted. Even though Tong Ching wasn't targeting them, their speed was greatly affected. Moreover, they clearly saw that Murong Yu was having a hard time dodging the falling stars. Could it be that he was pretending? In reality, he wasn't affected at all? But how is this possible? In the astral domain, it's an independent space. Even a god would be restrained by the astral domain. How is it possible that Murong Yu isn't restrained? Everyone was extremely shocked. Even Tong Ching's face was filled with disbelief. Murong Yu, you're courting death. You're really courting death. Tong Ching roared crazily. The speed of the great annihilation of heaven and earth became even faster. It continuously attacked Murong Yu, wanting to annihilate him as well. Murong Yu's expression was cold. He stepped into the void and crushed a gigantic star. In a flash, he appeared in front of Tong Ching and punched out again. Die! Astral energy, condense my body. Tong Ching retreated rapidly. At the same time, he condensed the astral energy and wanted to regrow his physical body. However, what shocked and enraged him was that half of his body that had been destroyed by Murong Yu couldn't be regrown. Regardless of whether he used the astral energy or his physical strength, it was the same. Tong Ching was shocked. He didn't know what was going on. At this time, Murong Yu had already caught up with him. In the astral domain, Tong Qing's speed was extremely fast. It was as if he had teleported. However, Murong Yu's speed wasn't slow either. He could tear the void apart as he wished. Like a shadow, he followed Tong Qing closely. Powerful energy blasted out continuously, causing the heavens to crumble and the earth to crack. Stars fell from the sky. Not good. Tong Qing isn't a match for Murong Yu. Should we take action? The sacred master of the sacred gate, Liu Bai, frowned and said, "There's no hurry. Tong Qing wants to kill all of us. He's malicious. We have to save him, but not now." The palace master of the celestial palace, Liu Ran, narrowed his eyes. Tong Qing was very powerful. Normally, they wouldn't dare to fight him directly. They were afraid of his astral domain. With their strength, once they were trapped in the astral domain, they would be severely injured even if they could tear the domain apart and escape. It could be said that Tong Qing was the most powerful among them. He was also the most powerful person. He controlled the 36 enforcers of the cultivation world. Moreover, they still needed Tong Qing to attack the cultivation world in China. If they could control Tong Qing, their strength would skyrocket. They would be able to suppress the other two and become the most powerful force in the alliance of the immortal realm. In this operation, he could even obtain the godhead and kill the others one by one. The three of them had different thoughts. Their eyes flickered as they looked at Tong Qing, who was being chased by Murong Yu. Swoosh! At this time, the three of them suddenly saw the scenery in front of them change. Then they found themselves in Kaijian City. However, Tong Qing and Murong Yu were nowhere to be seen. Bastard! How dare he push us out of the astral domain? Tu Wanxue gritted his teeth and said. Liu Bai, the sect master of the celestial sect, looked at Tu Wanxue with a mysterious smile and said, "It seems that you don't want to leave the astral domain. Weren't you worried that Tong Qing would harm you?" "Huh." Tu Wanxue laughed and said, "Isn't it because Tong Qing is in danger? We are on the same side. I just want to save him. I don't want anything to happen to him." "That's right. Tong Qing can't be harmed. We still need to rely on him to enter the cultivation world in China. If he is killed, we won't be able to enter the cultivation world in China." Liu Ran, the palace master of the celestial palace, said with a gloomy face. He wanted to control Tong Qing's soul, but he didn't want anything to happen to Tong Qing. However, if Tong Qing doesn't show up, we won't be able to find where they are. The astral domain is in the void. It's difficult for outsiders to find it. The astral domain was actually in the void near Kaijian City. But who knew where it was? Of course, if they broke the void, they could find the astral domain. However, would they be able to shatter the void? Or maybe the astral domain was in Kaijian City, unless they destroyed Kaijian City too. However, this was impossible. They couldn't destroy Kaijian City. After all, it was their base. Murong Yu, you want to kill me? That's impossible. You have to die today. In the astral domain, Tong Qing roared crazily. He ran quickly and controlled the astral domain to attack Murong Yu. However, Murong Yu wasn't affected at all in the astral domain. No matter how sharp his attack was, it couldn't affect Murong Yu. A domain was actually a small independent space. But this space was also in the immortal realm. The rules of space that Murong Yu controlled were still useful. A domain had to follow the rules of space. In fact, a domain was a subdivision of the rules of space. It was too shallow and couldn't be compared to the real rules of space. Therefore, the astral domain couldn't do anything to Murong Yu. It couldn't even attack Murong Yu. Tong Qing's power was depleted, and he couldn't control the astral domain anymore. Moreover, half of his body was destroyed by Murong Yu, so his power was greatly depleted. At this moment, Tong Qing's power was decreasing. Soon, it fell below 7 million and continued to decrease. On the other hand, Murong Yu's strength remained at around 7 million. The gap between them was getting bigger. In the end, Murong Yu took a step forward and sent Tong Qing flying with a punch. This time, the lower half of Tong Qing's body was completely destroyed. "Why aren't you affected?" Tong Ching was furious, and she roared unwillingly. But he still ran crazily. But he didn't dare to remove the astral domain. He knew that as soon as he removed the astral domain, he would be attacked by the immortal palace master Lu Ran and the others. By then, he wouldn't just be facing Murong Yu alone. Murong Yu frowned slightly. If this continues, I'm afraid it'll be really hard to kill Tong Ching. Plus, the origin energy of the astral cultivation world is extremely strong. If he wants to escape back to the cultivation world, it'll be hard to stop him. In fact, Murong Yu could use the yin-yang fire to burn the astral domain. But if he did that, even Tong Ching would be burned to death. Even the origin energy of the astral cultivation world would be burned. In that case, Murong Yu wouldn't be able to get the origin energy of the astral cultivation world. If he couldn't get it this time, he would never get it in the future. Suddenly, Murong Yu stopped. With a flip of his hand, a bottle of God Tribulation pills appeared in his palm. Chapter 802. Tong Ching, I think you're nearing the end of your lifespan, right? 1,000,000 years or a few 100,000 years? Less than 100,000 years? What you're doing now is nothing more than trying to pass the divine tribulation and ascend. Murong Yu removed the cork from the jade bottle in his hand. A strong pill fragrance wafted out, filling the entire astral field. Is this the divine tribulation pill? Tong Ching couldn't help but stop when he smelled the strong pill fragrance. Greed flashed in his eyes. There are 81 levels of the divine tribulation. One divine tribulation pill can completely avoid one level of the pill. Want to pass the divine tribulation? It's actually not that difficult to become a god. All you need is 81 divine tribulation pills. Murong Yu smiled at Tong Ching. The murderous aura around him had completely disappeared. He looked like he was having a heart-to-heart talk with a friend. Who would have known that they were mortal enemies just a moment ago? That he couldn't wait to kill him? What do you mean? Tong Ching's face was full of greed, but he still looked at Murong Yu cautiously. He knew how cunning Murong Yu could be. Earlier, he pretended to be restrained and ambushed Tong Ching. No matter how stupid Tong Ching was, he wouldn't believe Murong Yu so easily. Deal, Murong Yu said flatly. What deal? Tong Ching's heart skipped a beat. He desperately needed the divine tribulation pill. Otherwise, even if he conquered the Huaxiao world of self-cultivators, he might not be able to enter the immortal tomb, let alone get the godhead. He wasn't confident about passing the divine tribulation at all. Stop attacking the Huaxiao world of self-cultivators, and I'll give you the divine tribulation pill. Tong Ching's heart skipped a beat, but then he sneered. That's the divine tribulation pill. That's all you want? Even the entire Huaxiao world of self-cultivators can't compare to these divine tribulation pills. If that's all you have, then I suspect you have a motive. Are these divine tribulation pills all fake? Of course they're real. You know Sun Haoshan, right? He took the divine tribulation pill and became a quasi-god. Or you might be suspicious. Murong Yu smiled faintly and waved his hand. Immediately, more than 10 people appeared beside him. Their auras were surging and their chi and blood were surging. Quasi-gods, they're all quasi-gods. Tong Ching was astonished when he saw these people coming out. This was because the dozen or so people around Murong Yu were all quasi-gods. These are just some of the quasi-god experts in Shenzhen. Right now, I have at least 50 quasi-god experts under me. Moreover, as time passes, the number of quasi-gods under my command will increase. What will the Immortal Realm Alliance and the Divine Union use to stop me? Shenzhen, even if there is a godhead in the Tomb of the Gods, can you get it? Even if you obtain a godhead, you still need time to refine it. While you were refining the godhead, the immortal world was already under my rule. At that time, no matter how big the immortal world is, where will you find a place to stand? Even if you refine the godhead and become a god, I will consign you to eternal damnation. Moreover, your astral domain is very powerful, but it can't do anything to me. I can break your astral domain with a single thought. Once the astral domain is broken, given your current strength, I'm afraid you will be directly controlled by Lu Ran and the others. As he spoke, a small flame burned in Murong Yu's palm. It was the Yin-Yang flame. Looking at the lantern-like flame in Murong Yu's hand, Tong Qing felt an incomparably intense aura rise in her heart. He knew that although the flame looked ordinary, it was definitely a threat to him. Murong Yu was right. However, it was impossible for Tong Qing to trust Murong Yu just like that. How'd I know if this is a scheme of yours? Once you find the opportunity, you might kill me. Tong Qing pondered for a long time before saying this. His tone was starting to soften, which meant that he was very interested in Murong Yu's so-called deal. Murong Yu, am a man of my word. As long as you immediately call back the enforcers and stop them from attacking, I will immediately give you the God's Tribulation Pill. Of course, if you doubt the God's Tribulation Pill, I can have one of Shenzhen's disciples undergo the tribulation on the spot. I want 100 God's Tribulation Pills. After pondering for a long time, Tong Qing finally agreed to the deal with Murong Yu. Very well, but I will only give you the God's Tribulation Pill after I see the enforcers return. However, I will give you 5 God's Tribulation Pills first. They will allow you to pass through the 5th level of the God's Tribulation. Don't think about running away after you get 5 God's Tribulation Pills. The immortal realm is vast, but no matter where you go, you won't be able to escape from me. Tong Qing smiled bitterly, feeling helpless. If Murong Yu really gave him so many God's Tribulation Pills, why would he attack the Huaxia cultivation world? Why would he need the Godhead? He could become a god by refining the Godhead. However, he would never be able to reach a higher realm. If he used the God's Tribulation Pills to become a god, his potential would be limitless. All right, I agree. Tong Qing took the 5 God's Tribulation Pills and immediately smiled. Then, Murong Yu put Xiahou Zhua and the others into the Hichu Luoshu world and walked towards Tong Qing. One of the conditions of the deal was that Murong Yu had to help Tong Qing recover his body. Lingnan City. Murong Yu stepped out of the void, and Tong Qing followed closely behind. Let's do it here. Summon all the enforcers back here. As long as I see them, I will give you the remaining 90 or so God's Tribulation Pills, Murong Yu said calmly. Tong Qing nodded slightly, then used a special method to contact the enforcers hiding in the cultivation world. Tong Qing's words were very effective as the Palace Lord of the Heavenly Punisher Palace. With just one order, Murong Yu saw the enforcers break through the void and appear in the Lingnan City branch of the Heavenly Punisher Palace. 16? Only 16? Half a day later, all the enforcers were gathered in the main hall. However, Murong Yu's brows were slightly furrowed. He controlled 15 cultivation worlds. In addition, Tong Qing was the enforcer of the Stellar Cultivation World. This meant that other than him and Tong Qing, there should be 20 enforcers. However, there were only 16 now. For we're missing. Only 16. I can't contact the others at all, Tong Qing said helplessly. The Yanhuang Immortal Realm had 36 cultivation worlds. As the Palace Lord of the Heavenly Punisher Palace, he could only contact 16 enforcers. This made him feel a little embarrassed. Of course, what he didn't know was that 14 of the enforcers of the cultivation world were either under Murong Yu's control or killed. Of course, he could not contact these people. As for the remaining 4 enforcers, they were probably in seclusion somewhere, or they might have been killed. The 4 enforcers could not do much. 16 cultivation worlds. If I refine all of them, I wonder if I'll be able to surpass 10 million Earth Dragons of strength? Murong Yu's face revealed an incomparably excited expression as he looked at the enforcers gathered in the hall. Seeing Murong Yu's expression, Tong Qing felt a little uneasy. He felt that something was wrong. However, he could not tell what was wrong. In fact, Tong Qing would never have dreamed that Murong Yu could use these enforcers to increase his strength. If he had known, he would not have gathered these enforcers even if it meant death. This was clearly giving Murong Yu power. As long as Murong Yu refined all the cultivation worlds here and controlled them, even a god would not be a match for him. Of course, Tong Qing did not know this. He only thought that Yu wanted to control these enforcers. In any case, these enforcers were useless to him. It was fine if they were controlled. At most, he would lose some immortal supremacy experts. I've temporarily controlled these people. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Yu looked at Tong Qing and asked him on the surface. In reality, Yu had already stepped into the main hall. At the same time, he waved his hand and a huge suction force acted on the 16 enforcers. The strongest of these enforcers was only an immortal supremacy. Before they could even react, they were all sucked into the Hichu Luoshu world by Yu. Ha ha ha! Yu laughed in his heart after taking all the enforcers. Now, he was not afraid of anyone. As long as he refined all the enforcers, he would immediately kill GMO and unify the immortal world. Here are 50 God's tribulation pills. Yu threw a jade bottle to Tong Qing. Aren't there 100 pills? There's still more than 40 left. Tong Qing looked at Yu angrily and said in a low voice, "Are you going back on your word?" Yu smiled faintly. "It's not that I want to go back on my word. I've always been a man of my word. However, I don't have that many God's tribulation pills on me right now. I'll give you enough in 3 days." Before he finished speaking, Yu's figure flashed and disappeared from the spot. Only Tong Qing was left with an ashen face. It wasn't that Yu didn't have enough God's tribulation pills. He just didn't want to give them to Tong Qing. In reality, Yu didn't want to break his promise. As he said, he could give Tong Qing the complete God's tribulation pills in 3 days. The reason why he said 3 days later was because he didn't trust Tong Qing. Once this guy passed the God's tribulation, he would probably attack Yu first. This guy had the star domain. Although Yu wasn't afraid of him, Shenzhen still had a lot of people. Once Tong Qing attacked Shenzhen, it would be very disadvantageous for Yu. 3 days was enough for Yu to do some things. The main thing was to increase his strength. He wanted to refine all the origin energies of the cultivation worlds of the 16 enforcers in 3 days and take control of their cultivation worlds. This time, I'm afraid they'll all break through to the late stage of the Immortal Emperor realm. Will they be able to break through 10 million Earth Dragon power? I'm looking forward to it. Yu thought as he stepped into the Hichu Luoshu world. Chapter 803. 3 days later, outside Kaijian City, the palace master of the Immortal Palace, Lu Ran, Tu Wanchu, Lu Bai, and a group of experts from the Immortal Realm Alliance gathered. In front of them, the leader of the Divine Alliance and a group of experts from the Divine Alliance were staring at each other. Ji looked at Lu Ran and the others gloomily. "Lu Ran, what's the meaning of this? Where's Tong Qing? We agreed to act today, but now you're avoiding us? Do you want to take the divine spark for yourself?" Ji's face was ashen because he didn't see Tong Qing. Naturally, he thought that Lu Ran and the others wanted to monopolize the godhoods in the divine tomb. Of course, they had set up a restriction in the void. Even if Ji roared, no one outside could hear him. Therefore, he questioned them loudly without any hesitation. Lu Ran and the others looked unnatural after being questioned by Ji Itong. Speaking of Tong Qing, he had disappeared after the battle with Yu 3 days ago. No matter how they tried to contact him and searched every inch of the void near Kaijian City, they still couldn't find Tong Qing and Yu. Could they have perished together? Over the past 3 days, Lu Ran and the others often had this thought. However, if Tong Qing had really perished together with Yu, Lu Ran and the others didn't think it was a good thing. Without Tong Qing and Yu, they had no right to order the punishment enforcers to attack the Huaxia cultivation world. Moreover, if Yu is killed, the Hichu Luoshu in his hands would be scattered and they would no longer have any fate with it. Lu Ran and the others looked embarrassed when they heard Ji Hao's question. After all, Tong Qing was a member of the Immortal Realm Alliance. They felt embarrassed that he hadn't shown up when they agreed to do so. "What do you mean? Since when did we want to take it for ourselves?" Tu Wanchua looked at Ji with an ugly expression and said unhappily, "If not, what about Tong Qing? Let me tell you, without me, You won't be able to enter the divine tomb, Ji said coldly. As for whether Lu Ran and the others wanted to take the divine spark for themselves, he was very calm. He knew that Lu Ran and the others couldn't enter the divine tomb. In the entire Yin Huang immortal realm, he was the only one who could enter the divine tomb. If he didn't dare to enter the Huaxia cultivation world alone, he wouldn't have teamed up with Lu Ran and the others. In truth, unless he had no other choice, Ji Hao wouldn't choose to refine a godhead. However, there was nothing he could do about it. The deity tribulation pills had been snatched away by Murong Yu. Although he had obtained a few more pills later on, they weren't enough to last him until he passed the deity tribulation. However, he was also very anxious to return to the God realm. Therefore, refining of God's Lord. 3 days ago, Tong Qing left the Kaijian city alone, saying that he had something to attend to. As for why he didn't appear today, we have no idea. The Holy Gate's patriarch, Liu Bai, said indifferently, "Did Tong Qing and Murong Yu perish together? They wouldn't tell sect of sect? Sect. If GMO knew that Murong Yu might be dead, he would immediately enter Huaxia's cultivation world and the tomb of the gods. At that time, they wouldn't even be able to see the godhead shadow, let alone get a share of the loot. Are you messing with me?" Ji Hao was enraged. A violent aura gushed out from him. Boundless killing intent soared into the sky. It almost materialized and pierced through the sky. Lu Ran and the other two narrowed their eyes, and their auras rose rapidly. Although Ji was strong, they weren't afraid of him. Even if they had to fight, they weren't afraid. Swords were drawn, and a fight could break out at any moment. While they were confronting each other, in the southernmost part of the immortal realm, in the depths of the South Sea, where Xiahou Zhuo was undergoing his divine tribulation. Tribulation lightning filled the sky, and the terrifying pressure of heaven and earth pressed down, causing the void to tremble and shatter. Amidst the tribulation lightning, a figure stood proudly in the sky. The tribulation thunder was like a storm, drowning the entire sky. However, the strange thing was that when the tribulation lightning struck the figure, it automatically bypassed him and didn't strike him. The divine tribulation pill can indeed avoid the heavenly tribulation. It can help one pass through the heavenly tribulation. Tong Qing was very excited. The person undergoing the heavenly tribulation wasn't Tong Qing, but one of Shenzhen's late-stage immortal emperor experts. 3 days ago, Murong Yu disappeared after taking away the 16 enforcers. But Murong Yu didn't break his promise. 3 days later, Murong Yu appeared in front of Tong Qing again. Tong Qing was happy, but also shocked. He realized that Murong Yu was only an early-stage immortal emperor 3 days ago. But 3 days later, Murong Yu had reached the late-stage immortal emperor realm. 2 small realms in a day. This made Tong Qing slightly shocked, but he didn't keep it with him. Murong Yu's strength had reached the quasi-god realm. Tong Qing thought that he was purposely suppressing his cultivation level as the immortal emperor realm or lower. For a quasi-god realm expert, wasn't an easy matter to show what realm they were at. When Murong Yu returned, he immediately handed over 40 God's Tribulation pills to Tong Qing. Together with the 50 God's Tribulation pills from before, there were exactly 100 pills in total. But Tong Qing was still worried about the quality of the Divine Tribulation pills. He even asked Murong Yu's men to test the authenticity of the Divine Tribulation pills. In fact, he had even swapped the God's Tribulation elixir in his hand with the Sage Sex Tribulation elixir. Murong Yu sneered in his heart when he saw the excited Tong Qing. He didn't do anything to the Divine Tribulation pills he gave Tong Qing. He didn't need to do that. So what if Tong Qing successfully passed the Heavenly Tribulation? He didn't need to be afraid. In the end, Murong Yu couldn't help but mock Tong Qing. I, Murong Yu, have always been a man of my word. Do you believe me now? Hee, it's better to be safe than sorry. Tong Qing chuckled, but he sneered in his heart. Shenzhen finished his Heavenly Tribulation. He safely passed the 81 Heavenly Tribulation and became a quasi-god. He could break through the void and ascend to the God realm. Ha, it's my turn. Before the Glory Sect's newly ascended quasi-god expert could return, Tong Ching had already charged out with a hearty laugh. When he was a certain distance away from Murong Yu and the rest, he did not hesitate to trigger the deity's tribulation. With the divine tribulation pills, he wasn't afraid of anyone causing trouble. No matter how many people caused trouble, the heavenly tribulation would be strengthened. As long as it was within the range of any tribulation lightning, the God tribulation pill could avoid the tribulation lightning. Of course, Murong Yu never thought of causing trouble, so he just watched coldly as Tong Ching passed the heavenly tribulation. After passing the heavenly tribulation, he became even stronger. He reached the late-stage quasi-god realm. More than 7 million Earth Dragon power? Murong Yu's face flashed with surprise. This was the first time he saw a quasi-god expert pass the heavenly tribulation. Those who hadn't reached the quasi-god realm before would all become quasi-gods with at least 5 million Earth Dragon power after passing the heavenly tribulation. That was normal. However, the fact that a quasi-god expert's heavenly tribulation could also increase his power made Murong Yu excited. I wonder if my power will continue to increase after passing the heavenly tribulation. Late-stage quasi-god with more than 7 million Earth Dragon power. Tong Ching was very excited as he felt the surging power in his body. He could already feel the existence of the God realm. He knew that as long as he wanted to, he could tear open the passage between the immortal realm and the God realm and ascend. However, he wouldn't ascend now because he still had some unfinished business. He immediately turned around and looked at Murong Yu in the distance with a cold smile. He took a step forward and crossed hundreds of millions of miles. In the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Murong Yu. At the same time, he stretched out his hand, shattering the void as he ruthlessly grabbed at Murong Yu. When the power of over 7 million Earth Dragons erupted, it was truly earth-shattering and destructive. Murong Yu was shocked and angry. He looked at Tong Ching and said coldly, "Tong Ching, what are you doing?" "What am I doing? I just want you to die." Tong Ching sneered and quickly grabbed at him. However, he didn't notice that Murong Yu didn't have any panic or fear on his face. In fact, Murong Yu didn't even take half a step back. "You want to kill me? Don't forget who gave you the God Tribulation pill. Are you going to burn the bridge after crossing the river?" Murong Yu said coldly. "So what if I am?" Tong Ching sneered and continued. "Kid, haven't you heard of the phrase, ask a tiger for its skin? Moreover, you're too weak. A treasure like the Hichu Luoshu isn't something you can control." "Hichu Luoshu?" Murong Yu sneered and shouted again. "Tong Ching, are you determined to kill me and take the Hichu Luoshu? Cut the crap. Die." Tong Ching couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Murong Yu and grabbed at him. "If that's the case, don't blame me." Murong Yu had a strange smile on his face. At the same time, he reached out his hand and grabbed at Tong Ching's hand. "You're overestimating yourself." Tong Ching sneered. But soon, his sneer and complacent smile turned into a look of shock. Bang! Murong Yu slapped at Tong Ching's hand. Tong Ching's hand couldn't withstand a single blow and was instantly crushed into powder. Tong Ching was shocked. His body swayed, and he was about to retreat. However, at this moment, Murong Yu's hand pressed down. Bang! Tong Ching was slapped down from the sky by Murong Yu's palm. He fiercely slammed into the ground and fell flat on his face. "You're actually so powerful? This is an illusion. It must be an illusion." Tong Ching roared furiously and struggled to get up. However, Murong Yu was already beside him and stomped him deep into the ground. Chapter 804. You probably think you're invincible after your tribulation. Murong Yu stomped Tong Ching deep into the ground. The powerful force behind the stomp nearly turned his body into dust. "Impossible. How can you be so strong? I have close to 8 million Earth Dragon strength." Tong Ching roared in disbelief. He had suffered a huge blow, close to 8 million Earth Dragon power. Even the G-Emperor didn't have this power. Tong Ching thought he could unify the immortal world and be invincible. This way, he could unify the immortal world before ascending to the God realm. He could kill all those who didn't like him. Then, he could ascend to the God realm with great achievements. What a glorious thing this was. However, he was depressed because, not to mention conquering the immortal dimension, he'd simply perished before he'd even achieved victory. Close to 8 million Earth Dragon power was slapped down by Muronyu with one slap. How powerful was Muronyu? 9 million Earth Dragon power? Or 10 million Earth Dragon power? Tong Qing knew that if Muronyu only had 9 million Earth Dragon power, he wouldn't be his match. However, Muronyu definitely couldn't suppress him with one slap. Such power was more than enough for Muronyu to unify the immortal world. However, how could Tong Qing believe this? He roared crazily and kept saying, "This is impossible," or something along those lines. "You don't know what you're talking about." Muronyu laughed coldly. If it was 3 days ago, he probably wouldn't be Tong Qing's match, even if he ate the bloodthirst pill. However, 3 days later, even if 10 Tong Qings attacked him, he would be able to suppress them with one hand. That was because he had taken control of 16 cultivation worlds in the past 3 days. In other words, Muronyu controlled 31 cultivation worlds. He was only 5 worlds away from being controlled. During this process, Muronyu's power kept increasing. He broke through from the initial stage of the Immortal Emperor Realm to the late stage of the Immortal Emperor Realm. 10 million Earth Dragon power. Muronyu's strength had already reached 10 million Earth Dragon force. The peak of the late stage of Quasi-God was the limit of power that the Immortal Realm could bear. Originally, 16 cultivation worlds were enough for Muronyu to increase his strength by 5 million or more. However, it seemed like 10 million Earth Dragon power was the limit. No matter how many worlds Muronyu controlled, he could not continue to break through. This made him feel a little regretful. Of course, with his current strength, he could definitely dominate the immortal world. He was invincible in the world. No matter how powerful Ji was, he would still be crushed to death by him. As for Tong Qing, Muronyu did not put him in his eyes at all. The reason Muronyu gave him the God Tribulation pill was because he didn't want to break his promise. Moreover, he wanted to see what kind of person Tong Qing was. If he obediently stayed in the immortal world and waited for his ascension, Muronyu naturally wouldn't do anything to him. However, Tong Qing disappointed Muronyu greatly. After passing his tribulation, he immediately tried to kill Muronyu and take the Hichu Luo Shu. Naturally, Muronyu would not show him any mercy. 10 million Earth Dragon power. The limit of 10 million Earth Dragon power. You must have reached the limit of your strength. Tong Qing roared in shock and fear. He was strong, but he was nothing in front of Muronyu. At this moment, Tong Qing was filled with regret. He regretted attacking Muronyu. He didn't want to die. I've already passed my tribulation to become God. I don't want to die. Yes, I've passed my tribulation. I can ascend at any time. I want to ascend. Tong Qing roared and began to sense the immortal world. He wanted to open a passage between the two worlds. As long as he entered the passage, Muronyu would not be able to continue suppressing him no matter how powerful he was. However, how could Muronyu let him have his way? Those who wanted to kill him would have to die. Immediately, Muronyu slapped down. Not only did he seal Tong Qing's strength, more cruelly, after a few slaps, Tong Qing's cultivation level was shaved off by Muronyu. "Ah, you've shaved off my cultivation level, my strength. No, I only have 3 million Earth Dragon power left." Tong Qing suddenly let out a shrill cry. This was because he realized that more than half of his legs had been shaved off. With his current strength, even an ordinary immortal supremacy could kill him. At this moment, he was finally terrified. With his strength sealed, he could no longer sense the immortal world. Naturally, he could not ascend. In fact, Muronyu's actions were crueler than killing him. Star Cultivation Realm's origin source, come out. Muronyu suddenly snorted. His large hand reached into Tong Qing's dantian and forcefully pulled out the resplendent origin force that resembled a star. This was the strongest existence in the Yanhuang Immortal Realm's 36 cultivation realms. It was extremely powerful. Without hesitation, Murong Yu slapped the origin source into his dantian and refined it instantly. Immediately, Murong Yu felt that his aptitude had improved. It seemed like he could break through the advanced Immortal Emperor realm and reach the Immortal Supremacy realm at any time. Of course, before he broke through his cultivation level, his strength could not continue to increase. In fact, Murong Yu doubted that even if he broke through to the Immortal Supremacy realm, his strength would still increase dramatically. After all, 10 million Earth Dragon power was the limit. However, Murong Yu was still looking forward to entering the Immortal Supremacy realm. What was the limit? The limit was meant to be broken. In the Immortal realm, even the quasi-god realm experts only had a lifespan of one era. However, Murong Yu's current lifespan had already surpassed the lifespan of an era, reaching the terrifying realm of several eras. Wasn't this breaking through the limit? Murong Yu believed that his strength would eventually break through the limit. What are you doing? Don't kill me. I finally passed the god's tribulation and am about to become a god. Don't kill me. Tong Qing was finally terrified. He no longer looked as arrogant as before. All that was left was fear and begging. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Why would I want to kill you? Murong Yu smiled, then suddenly slapped Tong Qing, causing her to faint. At the same time, he read Tong Qing's memories. 3 days later, the gathering outside Kaijian City? Doesn't that mean it's today? If that's the case, I'll catch all of you in one fell swoop. After saying that, Murong Yu threw Tong Qing into the Hichu Luoshu world. Then, he tore open the void with his bare hands, stepped into the void, and disappeared. Outside Kaijian City, the leaders of the Immortal Realm Alliance and the Divine Union were still in a standoff. Ji thought that Tong Qing and the others wanted to take the godhoods and treasures in the Tomb of the Gods for themselves. However, Lu Ran and the others were determined not to reveal the fact that Tong Qing might have died. If they revealed the truth, Ji Hao might get the godhoods in the Tomb of the Gods. When that happened, they would die speechlessly. If they did not reveal the truth, and Ji Hao did not have the godhoods, they would still be evenly matched, and no one would be able to do anything to the other. Of course, their lifespans would still be limited. Whoosh! All of a sudden, the void above them cracked open, and a figure stepped out of the crack. Murong Yu. Immediately, everyone could not help but exclaim in surprise. In particular, Lu Ran and the others' expressions were even more interesting. Originally, they thought that Murong Yu and Tong Qing had perished together. But now, Murong Yu had appeared. However, there was no trace of Tong Qing. Lu Ran and the others had a bad feeling. Could Tong Qing have been killed by Murong Yu? If that was the case, they were in danger. Hello everyone, long time no see. Are you all gathered here to discuss how to destroy the Huaxia cultivation world? As soon as Murong Yu appeared, he smiled at the people below. Hearing this, Ji Hao and the others were shocked and looked at Murong Yu in disbelief. They were the only ones who knew that they had attacked the Huaxia cultivation world. How did Murong Yu know about this? Lu Ran and the others' hearts skipped a beat. They had thought that Murong Yu knew because Tong Qing had betrayed them. Could Tong Qing be working with Murong Yu? Instantly, Ji Hao and the others glared at Murong Yu with murderous intent. They were almost ready to attack. However, Murong Yu wasn't affected in the slightest. This little bit of murderous intent and aura could not affect him at all. He stepped down from the sky as if there was no one around him. Finally, he appeared between Ji Yi and Lu Ran. If Ji Hao and Lu Ran wanted to attack him, this was the best position to do so. This idiot, Lu Ran and the others looked at Murong Yu as if they were looking at an idiot. They thought that Murong Yu was simply throwing his life away. In reality, did Murong Yu really not know how disadvantageous his position was for him? In fact, he was bold because he was skilled. Or rather, he was confident that he could suppress all of them if they attacked him together. Look at how tense you are. You must be wondering how I know about your plan, right? Murong Yu smiled faintly. With a thought, Tong Qing appeared in front of them. Murong Yu, let me go. Don't kill me. Tong Ching involuntarily let out a roar the moment he came out. He had already been killed by Murongyu before he could come out. However, he soon realized that something was wrong. Ji Hao, Lu Ran, and the others were all here. A cold light flashed through Tong Ching's eyes. However, in the end, he still looked at Murongyu with a pleading expression. He knew that as long as Murongyu wanted to, he would be completely annihilated. Even if Ji Hao and the others worked together, they wouldn't be able to stop Murongyu. However, Tong Ching's appearance gave Ji Hao and the others a fright. Tong Ching, have you gone mad? You're begging this kid for mercy? You're a disgrace to all quasi-gods. Tu Wanxue roared, his face full of anger and disdain. The others also looked at Tong Ching with indifference and confusion. They all didn't understand why Tong Ching was begging Murongyu for mercy. Was he begging Murongyu for mercy? If news of this got out, how would they be able to show their faces in the world of immortals? Chapter 805. Your strength is broken through again. You have the strength of a quasi-god in the early stage of the Immortal Emperor realm. Now that you're in the late stage of the Immortal Emperor realm, what realm have you reached? Coincidentally, you're the only obstacle for me to enter the Huaxia cultivation world. You'll stay here today. Ji, who had been silent since Murongyu's appearance, suddenly shouted. At the same time, he reached out his hand and grabbed at Murongyu. He wanted to kill Murongyu with one blow. Murongyu was the key to entering the Huaxia cultivation world. As long as they killed Murongyu, their only obstacle to entering the Huaxia cultivation world would be gone. Lu Ran and the other two also knew this. Although Tong Ching's performance shocked, angered, and even puzzled them. However, when Ji made his move, they also made their move. In an instant, the four experts erupted with incomparably powerful energy and attacked Murongyu from afar. They wanted to kill him outside of Kai Jian City. Seeing this, Tong Ching's eyes flashed with disdain. His figure flashed, and he quickly retreated. He knew how powerful Murongyu was. Ji Ran and the others were also very powerful, but they were definitely no match for Murongyu. You guys actually attacked me. Fine, I'll finish you off today. The immortal world is about to be unified, and I'll be the overlord of the immortal world, Murongyu said faintly. At the same time, he struck out with his palm. Bang, 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 bang. Murongyu's speed was extremely fast. He only needed to send out a palm strike, but it was enough to instantly shatter Ji Yi and the others' attacks, turning them into dust. At the same time, Murongyu struck out with his palm again. Almost at the same time, it hit the four of them. The four of them didn't even have time to react before they were sent flying. What powerful strength! Murongyu, what realm have you reached? The four of them were extremely shocked. They were quasi-gods after all, but they couldn't even withstand a single blow. How could they not be shocked? Murongyu soared into the sky and said, I'll give you all a chance now. Submit to me or die. His voice wasn't loud, but it was full of dominance. The expressions of the four men changed drastically. He finally understood why Tong Ching was behaving so strangely. She was actually begging a junior for mercy. It wasn't that Tong Ching was an idiot. It was just that Murongyu was too strong. He was so powerful that he instantly broke the combined attack of the four of them and sent them flying with a single slap. However, even though Murongyu was powerful, it was impossible for them to submit to him. After all, they were all high and mighty experts that had always been at the highest cultivation level in the immortal dimension. So how could they possibly submit to another? How could he submit to a junior? Especially Ji, who was a god. Although he was a fallen god, he was once a god and had the pride of a god. Submit to a kid who wasn't even a god? This was absolutely impossible. You are very powerful, but you want us to submit to you? That's impossible. We're not Tong Ching, Lu Ran said coolly. He glanced at Tong Ching as he spoke, his eyes full of disdain. He couldn't stand Tong Ching's behavior. They were all powerhouses, but she was groveling and begging a junior for mercy. What a disgrace. Tong Ching's expression changed when he heard this, but he quickly sneered inwardly. He was a quasi-god who'd passed his tribulation. As long as he wanted to, he could ascend to the god realm. He was already a god. His life was much more precious than Lu Ran and the others. If he hadn't passed his tribulation, he might have died rather than submit. But now, his strength would skyrocket and his lifespan would increase greatly if he ascended to the god realm. Why would he want to die? It's still unknown who will emerge victorious today. Murongyu, you are strong, but do you think you're a match for so many of us working together? Ji sneered and began to furiously increase his strength. Rumble, shadows of earth dragons kept appearing above his head. Soon his strength exceeded 7 million and reached 7,300,000. 7,300,000. Late quasi-god realm. Lu Bai cried out in surprise, his face full of shock. Your strength has increased. Tu Wanchua's expression was somewhat ugly. Ji was already stronger than them when they were on the Pill King continent. At that time, none of them were a match for Ji. Of course, it wouldn't have been so easy for Ji to kill them back then. But in just a few months, Ji's strength had exceeded 7 million and reached the late quasi-god realm. His strength had completely surpassed theirs. Now, if they were to fight Ji, they still wouldn't be a match for him. In fact, they would be in even more danger than before. Ji had the strength to kill them. 7,300,000 earth dragons of power? Tong Qing sneered in the distance. When he just passed his tribulation, he already had close to 8 million earth dragons of power. He was definitely much stronger than Ji. However, hadn't he still been slapped down by Murongyu? If it wasn't for the fact that Murongyu didn't want to kill him, he would have been slapped to death by Murongyu. Haha. In that case, let's kill Murongyu today. Then, we'll destroy the Huaxiao world of self-cultivators and enter the tomb of the gods. Tu Wanchua laughed loudly. His aura soared and his earth dragon power burst out continuously. 6,900,000. He only needed 100,000 earth dragons of power to enter the late quasi-god realm. Although he hadn't broken through, he was still a super expert. At the same time, Lu Bai and Lu Ran also burst out their strength. Their strength had reached more than 6,900,000, infinitely close to 7 million. The aura of the 4 super experts burst out, causing the sky to tremble. It was simply earth-shattering and causing the wind and clouds to change color. The experts of the Divine Union and the Immortal Realm Alliance, who were close by, were constantly pushed back by the terrifying aura that erupted from the 4 of them. Even the quasi-god realm experts were unable to withstand the powerful aura of the 4 of them. Even the distant Kaijian city seemed to be trembling. The immortals were terrified. In just a few months, all of you have broken through. You must have gained a lot in the Elixir King continent. However, you still have the nerve to show off your strength? Since you've chosen to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Murongyu, on the other hand, wasn't afraid at all. He took a step forward and sent out a punch that enveloped the 4 of them. Kill! The 4 of them roared furiously. Their violent energy transformed into the most violent attack. Their strongest attack blasted out. Boom! The power of the 2 sides collided fiercely halfway, and in an instant, an earth-shattering explosion erupted. The void was instantly torn apart. Chi-Chi. In the void, the power of the 4 experts couldn't withstand a single blow. It was shattered into fine powder the moment it came into contact. On the other hand, Murongyu's power tore through billions of voids and rapidly strangled the 4 experts. The 4 of them were shocked. Before they could react, Murongyu's attack was already in front of them. Immediately, they roared angrily again, and millions of Earth Dragon power erupted. However, all their resistance was futile. The power they unleashed couldn't withstand a single blow and was shattered by Murongyu. At the same time, Murongyu's power slammed into their bodies. The 4 of them seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. Their bodies felt as if they had been hit by a divine mountain from the divine realm. A powerful force bombarded them. Suddenly, their bodies flickered with various colors. Beams of divine light flickered, and they were all defensive treasures. Boom! Boom! The treasures on them were very powerful. They actually blocked Murong-Yu's attack. But even so, they were still sent flying. The powerful force shook their bodies to the point of almost shattering them. They were sent flying again. This time, they were injured and spat out blood in midair. You can actually block one of my attacks? You guys aren't considered trash. Murong-Yu sneered. He slapped out a huge palm that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. It enveloped the 4 experts and slapped down again. Bang! Bang! Murong-Yu's attacks were endless, giving Ji Yunshu and the others no time to react. Lu ran, and the others groaned inwardly as they spat out mouthfuls of blood. Even the radiance of their treasures had dimmed. On the other hand, Murong-Yu seemed to be taking a leisurely stroll as he slapped out one palm after another. It was as if he didn't care about the 4 experts at all. In fact, Murong-Yu was really like that. He didn't unleash his full power. Otherwise, the 4 experts would have been killed by him. Murong-Yu, don't push us too far. We're not easy to bully. If you push me too far, I'll drag you down with me, even if I die. Tu Wanshu roared. Endless demonic art, devour the heavens and earth. Tu Wanshu roared and began to use the ultimate move of the demonic art. Demonic shadows burst out from his body. Black light shrouded the sky and the earth, causing the world to sink into darkness. Terrifying forces that wanted to devour everything in this time went toward Murong-Yu. At the same time, the Sacred Master of the Sacred Gate also used his ultimate move. I'm a great sage, above the immortal gods, dominating everything. With a thought, I can kill both immortals and gods. The Palace Master of the Immortal Palace, Lu Ran, didn't say anything. He also used the ultimate move of the Immortal Palace. He turned into a venerable immortal and wanted to kill immortals and gods. After unleashing their ultimate techniques, the auras on their bodies skyrocketed. Their suppressive might covered the heavens and the earth. It was more than several times stronger than before. Only Ji didn't use his ultimate move. Seeing that they had all used their ultimate moves, Murong-Yu was excited. The reason why he didn't kill them directly was to force them to use their ultimate moves. He wanted to see if he could block their strongest attacks with his strength. After all, Murong-Yu was going to ascend to the immortal world. How strong was the immortal world? Murong-Yu didn't know, but what he needed to do was to make himself as strong as possible. Lu Ran and the other 2's strongest attacks. Even if they weren't as strong as the weakest immortal world, they weren't far from it. If he could block their attacks, then even after he ascended to the immortal world, he would still have the power to fight. Chapter 806. The 3 super experts who were infinitely close to the late quasi-god realm unleashed their strongest killing move at the same time. Terrifying power continued to erupt from their bodies. It shot up to the sky, tearing the sky and earth apart. It was like a tidal wave that swept out in all directions. Wherever it passed, the void was directly annihilated. It was vast and powerful, with the momentum to destroy 10,000 worlds. Countless experts in the surroundings retreated continuously. 100 million miles after another, they were afraid that they would be swept by this terrifying power and ultimately perish, consigned to eternal damnation. Even the distant Kaijian city could not help but tremble, as if it was about to be destroyed. Swish, Ji immediately retreated. Although they had joined forces to fight Murong-Yu just now, they were not friends. However, they were not friends but enemies. Now, the 3 of them unleashed their killing move to kill Murong-Yu. However, Ji did not doubt that if he did not leave, he would also be killed by the 3 of them. The 3 of them would definitely not go easy on him. Just in time, Murong-Yu suddenly roared as the aura on his body rapidly rose. At the same time, his face was filled with excitement. This is a killing move. In the hands of a late quasi-god expert, the power is really terrifying. I'm afraid it's a full blow of more than 9 million Earth Dragon power. Feeling the power erupting from the 3 of them, Murong-Yu was a little shocked, but more than that, he was excited. Each of the three of them had at least 9 million Earth Dragon power in their attack. And the combined attack of the three of them was definitely more than 10 million Earth Dragon power. How much power did the weakest person have? Murong-Yu did not know, but he knew that more than 10 million Earth Dragon power was already beyond the limit of the immortal world. Kill! Murong-Yu roared and took a step forward, shattering a large part of the void. His invincible divine fist carried with it a terrifying power capable of destroying the heavens and earth. With a single punch, it shattered the void and enveloped Lu Ran's group as it rushed forward. The sky changed color, and the sun and moon lost their light. The power of the punch shattered the sky, and the myriad of worlds trembled. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed. Murong-Yu die. Lu Ran roared and turned into a supreme, immortal venerable. He stepped out from the primordial era like an immemorial fiend god. His divine fist was as big as a divine mountain. It contained a terrifying aura that could annihilate immortals and gods. It shattered half of the sky and ruthlessly pressed down on Murong-Yu. On the other hand, the patriarch of the sacred gate, Lu Bai, was like an ancient great sage, exuding an incomparably ferocious aura. That was a kind of terrifying aura that was above that of the celestial immortals. It could suppress the myriad of worlds, dominate everything, and slay gods and demons with a single thought. As for the devil sex patriarch, Tu Wanshua, he was also terrifying. His entire body had turned into a huge devil god. He turned into a single body of darkness, devouring the heavens and devouring the earth as he charged towards Murong-Yu. What a terrifying aura. It's comparable to a deity in the deity world. How could there be such a heaven-defying technique in this tiny, immortal world? No, these techniques couldn't have been created by someone from a tiny, immortal world. It's just an inheritance from the deity world. Ji, who had retreated far away, was shocked when he saw such a terrifying aura erupting from Lu Ran's body. Damn it, I've fallen. Otherwise, how could these ant-like people be worthy of being my opponent? I can kill them with a single breath. But damn it, once I return to the deity world, the immortal world alliance, Murong-Yu, they'll all die. The entire Yin Huang immortal world will be destroyed. Ji roared madly in his heart. His body was filled with violent, killing intent. His eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Murong-Yu. Now, he hated Murong-Yu the most, because Murong-Yu was the only obstacle that prevented him from becoming an immortal again. If it wasn't for Murong-Yu, he would have already ascended to the deity world. How could he be willing to stay in this godforsaken place? A mere immortal world? Boom! While these thoughts flashed through Ji's mind, Murong-Yu and the others were already in a fierce battle. The first collision tore through the void for hundreds of millions of li. Although the void of the immortal world was sturdy, it couldn't withstand their attacks and was constantly being destroyed. Bang! A huge force came crashing down. Murong-Yu was hit hard and couldn't help but tremble violently. In the end, his entire body was sent flying by the impact. The power he sent out couldn't even withstand a single blow. It was shattered in the first wave of attacks. Lu Ran and the other two's attacks were only slightly weakened. Then, under their control, they tore through hundreds of millions of li and attacked Murong-Yu, who was tens of billions of li away. It's definitely over 10 million earthly dragon force. Murong-Yu was sent flying tens of billions of li away. From afar, he left a long trail in the void. This trail was the void that Murong-Yu had shattered along the way. It hadn't had time to heal yet. My chi and blood are roiling. If it was another expert with over 9 million Earth Dragons' power, I'm afraid they would have been killed on the spot. As Murong-Yu pondered, his life force began to frantically cleanse his body. It didn't take long for the power in his body to be suppressed, allowing him to return to his peak state. What a terrifying recovery. Murong-Yu's figure flickered as he took a step forward, shattering the sky as he rushed up. Dark, godly demon Prajna. Along the way, Murong-Yu unleashed the last move of the dragon elephant Prajna art. It was also the move with the most terrifying power. The void above Murong Yu's head suddenly split open. Then, two figures, one golden and one black, stepped out of the void. It was like two godly demons from the ancient times had stepped out of the void. Powerful and ancient auras burst out from their bodies. It was an aura that could suppress the myriad of worlds. Godly demon shadows. After the shadows appeared, one of them held a long spear while the other held a long sword. They let out a formless roar and slashed out. Suddenly, two gigantic sword light and spear light shattered everything and slashed at Lu Ran and the other two. What a terrifying aura! What an ancient aura! In the distance, Ji Shuang's pupils constricted. He looked terrified. He was shocked by the power of the godly demon. At the same time, he was even more shocked. How did Murong Yu know this skill? He had never heard of such a powerful aura. He wasn't an ordinary god in the realm of the gods. He had a high status and was very knowledgeable. Could it be that this skill was obtained in the Hichu Luoshu world? If that's the case, the greed in Ji Shuang's eyes grew stronger. He couldn't wait to kill Murong Yu and seize the Hichu Luoshu. While Ji Shuang was shocked, Lu Ran and the other two felt a sense of danger. They knew that Murong Yu's attack put them in danger. Kill. However, they weren't afraid at all. With a loud roar, they controlled their power and charged forward. In the sky, the four people's power collided fiercely. There was no earth-shattering explosion, nor was there an explosion of dazzling divine light. The power above seemed to vanish in an instant. It was a very strange sight. However, the experts present saw that tens of billions of miles, or even hundreds of billions of miles of space had been destroyed and annihilated in an instant. An enormous, pitch-black area had appeared. It was an eternally lonely darkness. It was so dark that it made one's heart flutter and soul tremble. Waves of apocalyptic aura emanated from it, suppressing the myriad worlds and causing all living beings to tremble in fear. Apocalypse of heaven and earth. Ji Shuang's expression changed drastically as he roared. I didn't expect their power to be so great. In the realm of the gods, only the most powerful existences can create apocalypse of heaven and earth. However, the void of the realm of immortals is still too weak. It's normal for them to create apocalypse of heaven and earth. Bang, 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 bang. Almost at the same time, Murong Yu and the others were sent flying. They spat out mouthfuls of blood in midair. All of them were severely injured. Their attacks also disappeared at this moment. Ji Shuang's eyes flashed as a cold light shot out from between his brows. He was ready to charge forward and take advantage of the opportunity to kill Murong Yu and the others. However, he hesitated for a moment before suppressing the strong, murderous intent in his heart. He couldn't guarantee that these people would have any other tricks up their sleeves. If by any chance he unleashed another ultimate technique, he would have to bear the consequences. He didn't have the freakish power of Murong Yu. However, although he didn't make a move, he had already raised his power to the limit. As long as he found anyone who was severely injured, he would definitely kill them. Cough, cough. Murong Yu kept coughing up blood. His face was a little pale, and there was a trace of shock on his face. The attack just now had not only shaken him to the point of coughing up blood, but also caused his body to crack open. However, Murong Yu believed that Lu Ran and the others were the ones with the heaviest injuries. After all, Lu Ran and the others had endured the same amount of power as him. However, they weren't as strong as Murong Yu in terms of strength or physique. Moreover, Murong Yu had the power of life, which Lu Ran and the other two didn't have. As long as he used the power of life to cleanse his injuries, he would be able to recover to his peak condition. However, it was impossible for Lu Ran and the others to recover. Just as Murong Yu had guessed, Lu Ran and the others were severely injured. Their injuries were much more severe than Murong Yu's. Their physical bodies were cracked, and their meridians were shattered. They were severely injured, and their power was greatly reduced. Lu Ran and the other two realized that they were severely injured and knew that things were not going well. Murong, you should be severely injured as well. There shouldn't be anything to be afraid of. However, If Ji Shuang wants to attack, we'll be in danger. The three of them looked at each other from hundreds of millions of miles away and saw the worry in each other's eyes. However, Ji Shuang, who they were worried about, didn't come. On the other hand, Moronyu had already stepped into the void and charged over with murderous intent. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.